Hello everyone. Welcome to Frightening Tales. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So, before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. This story revolves around 4 women. They were once seen as angels and white guardians of life, but behind closed doors, they formed what became known as the Sisterhood of Death, deliberately targeting patients in a hospital, silently snuffing out one life after another. What's chilling is this. Their crimes went unnoticed for 6 years, claiming hundreds of innocent lives. When the truth finally broke, Austria's Prime Minister called it the most brutal and horrifying crime in the nation's history. Vienna's mayor likened it to a grotesque medical experiment gone rogue. So what exactly happened that year? Thank you so much. Austria, nestled in the Eastern Alps of Southern Europe, has endured a turbulent past. In modern times, it grappled with the War of Succession, the Third Silesian War, and the Austro-Prussian War. Then came the collapse of World War I, followed by annexation by Germany in World War II. For a decade after the Soviet Union, the United States, Britain, and France occupied the country. It wasn't until 1955 that Austria reclaimed full independence. The people cherished this hard-won peace, pouring their hearts into rebuilding, and decades later, Austria rose to become one of the world's wealthiest nations. Its capital, Vienna, earned the title of the most livable city on earth and the most prosperous city in the world. But in the heart of this glittering city, a series of murders unfolded that shook the nation to its core, marked by unimaginable cruelty. And it all began with one woman, Wagner. Born in 1960 in a rural corner of Austria, Wagner grew up in crushing poverty. Her parents toiled day and night to make ends meet, leaving her the eldest to care for her younger siblings. As a child, she also tended to her bedroom grandmother, crippled by a leg injury. They say hardship forges resilience. By age 12, Wagner was already a little adult, wise beyond her years. While caring for her grandmother, she honed a knack for tending to the sick, her skills growing sharper with each passing day. Convinced she was born for this, she set her sights on becoming a nurse. But for someone who had to repeat a grade in elementary school, academics were a struggle. As expected, she later failed her nursing course. By 22, she still had no degree to her name. Yet her dream burned fiercely. Alone, she ventured to Vienna, the big city, to chase her calling as a nurse. Without qualifications or experience, she was turned away time and again. No hospital would take her, but fate has a way of opening doors. Just when Wagner was on the verge of giving up a prestigious hospital took a chance on her. It was only an assistant nurse position, but for Wagner, it was enough. She was one step closer to her dream. The hospital that hired her was Lane's General Hospital, established in 1839. By 1983, it employed 2,000 staff and stood as Austria's fourth largest medical facility, a cornerstone of the nation's healthcare. Ward 5 specialized in treating elderly patients with terminal or critical illnesses, most over 70 years old. Death was a frequent visitor here, so commonplace it barely raised an eyebrow. Many elderly patients struggled with mobility, relying heavily on nurses' care. This made the workload in Ward 5 far more grueling than in other wards. Assistant nurses in particular faced relentless tasks. Beyond their daily grind, they were tasked with cleaning soiled beds. After a patient's passing a grimy job, even doctors and registered nurses avoided leaving it to the assistants. In emergencies, when doctors were stretched thin, assistant nurses could even administer medications directly. Ward 5 housed the hospital's only internal medicine department and was barred from turning patients away. Overcrowded beds and a dire shortage of staff were constant issues. This made Ward 5 an unpopular assignment. Few wanted to work there, which explains why Wagner was hired so smoothly. She was assigned to the night shift. Drawing on her experience caring for her grandmother and her willingness to endure hardship, she adapted quickly. Before long, her exceptional work ethic earned her unanimous praise from the hospital's leadership. But as time passed, Wagner began to see the harsh reality. At home, she cared for one person. Here, it was a relentless stream of patients. Night shifts left her no time to rest. Her body pushed to the brink. Worse still, no matter how devotedly she cared for them, some patients still complained. Others slipped away despite her efforts. A question began to gnaw at her. Why am I breaking myself for this? Is it even worth it? Time slipped by and soon it was 1983. One night, a pivotal moment changed everything for Wagner. Exhausted, she stole a brief nap when a shrill bell shattered the silence. It came from the bed of a 77-year-old woman nearby. Wagner approached her eyes, meeting the patient's face twisted in agony. She'd seen this torment too many times. The old woman clutched Wagner's hand, sobbing, her pain spilling out in desperate pleas. She begged Wagner to end her suffering. Powerless, Wagner's heart raced. She wanted to help, but felt trapped. Staring into the woman's anguished eyes, a fierce internal struggle gave way to a chilling decision. Morphine. Morphine dulls the nervous system, a powerful painkiller when used right. But in the wrong hands or the wrong dose, it's a silent killer, especially for frail elderly patients. As the needle pierced the skin, the syringe's contents flowed into the woman's veins. Her body stilled, her pain erased. Then silence. Wagner had injected a lethal dose. The woman didn't survive. Panic seized Wagner. Her hands trembled as she checked the pulse, confirming the heart had stopped. The weight of what she'd done crashed over her, a life extinguished by her hand. Fear surged, but she whispered to herself. She begged me. She wanted this. Moments later, calm returned. Then, something darker, a twisted thrill, the power to control life and death. It exhilarated her. The next day, Wagner spun a lie. The patient died of natural causes. Her charm and camaraderie disarmed suspicion. No one questioned her. Exposing her deception would have been simple. A blood test could have revealed the morphine overdose. But in 1983, technology made detection easy. Yet, the doctor, unfazed by an elderly patient's sudden death, signed the death certificate without a second thought. Only then did Wagner's racing heart finally slow. From that moment, she was hooked. She became a specter of death, stalking the hospital's halls, using the same method to send off one elderly patient after another. Strangely, perhaps to ease her guilt or to share the rush of playing God, Wagner decided to form the Sisterhood of Death. Absurd as it sounds, she succeeded. Her early maturity gave her a magnetic pull, a natural leader's charisma. Over the next few years, she recruited 3 women who shared her twisted vision. The first was Maria Gruber, 19, a nursing school dropout now working as an assistant nurse on the night shift. Exhausted and vocal about her frustrations, her naivety made her dismiss Wagner's plan as insane at first. But Wagner's earnest pitch that this was a win-win, easing patients' pain while lightening their workload wore her down. After relentless persuasion, Maria joined idolizing Wagner. Next was Irene Liv, 21, newly married and trapped in an abusive home. Desperate to avoid her husband, she'd agreed to anything that kept her away. Wagner's words were enough to pull her in. The third, Stephanie Amayer, 43, was a recent Yugoslavian immigrant working nights in Ward 5. She gravitated toward younger colleagues befriending Wagner's group. Rumors say she stumbled upon their secret and was coerced into joining under threat. These 4 women shared a grim bond. Assistant nurses, night shift workers, toiling in the same ward, all seething with resentment for their grueling jobs. Under Wagner's command, they formed the sinful Sisterhood of Death. Wagner began indoctrinating them, framing their actions as mercy, ending patient suffering while freeing themselves. She taught them the art of morphine dosages, injections, and how to kill silently. As assistant nurses, they mastered the craft quickly. Their primary targets: the terminally ill. At first, their killings were sporadic, a strike every few months. No one batted an eye at the deaths. Emboldened, their pace quickened. Monthly murders became routine, their targets expanding from the terminally ill to those with milder ailments. A patient who demanded too much or dared to curse at them, they'd slip into an eternal sleep that very night. Their arsenal grew beyond morphine. Insulin, Rohypnol, common hospital drugs became their tools. Weak patients with unstable vitals were easy prey. A slight missed dose could trigger fatal complications. Without blood tests, overdoses went unnoticed. But monotony set in. The drug method felt repetitive, and the rising cost of pill-forward meds risked exposure. What next? Something dramatic, traceless. The group brainstormed, and Wagner devised a new method. 3 would act in concert. 1. Pin the patient's head, clamping their nose shut, forcing mouth-only breathing. Another held the jaw, pouring water relentlessly. The victim had to swallow or drown as water flooded their lungs. Death came via dryland drowning or water intoxication. Electrolyte imbalances from excessive water intake. Mild cases caused headaches or shortness of breath. Severe ones killed. Fluid in the lungs was common among elderly patients, so hospitals saw nothing amiss. Night after night, the 4 women struck. Over the years, they killed countless victims. A complaint, a refusal to comply. Even snoring, bedwetting, or ringing the call bell could spark their rage. A death sentence in disguise. Ward 5's patient numbers dwindled. The workload lightened. 5 years passed before the hospital's leadership took notice. The death rate in Ward 5 was sky high, especially at night. Families grew outraged, and some staff whispered about flawed protocols. Rumors swirled of a serial killer haunting Ward 5, preying on the elderly. Panic gripped patients. The ward earned a grim nickname. Gossip spread like wildfire. A doctor noticed a patterned death spike during Wagner's group's night shifts. He alerted the police, but the hospital's leadership stonewalled brazenly, denying any issues and dismissing rumors as baseless. Whether shielded by influence or other forces, the investigation stalled and faded. Emboldened, Wagner's group grew reckless, believing they were untouchable. The hospital would cover for them. They killed freely, then drank, bragged, and roamed Vienna's streets carefree. But justice waits. A year later, their crimes unraveled, not through cunning deduction, but sheer chance. After shifts, the fort often hit a bar, downing drinks and boasting about patients who met sudden ends. In February 1989, after weeks of heavy drinking, their tongues loosened. Wagner's seething recounted how a patient dared call her a vile name, earning a gruesome fate. She described the murder in chilling detail. Unbeknownst to them, a doctor sat nearby, overhearing every word. He knew of 2 patients who suffered sudden hypoglycemia, with tests revealing massive insulin overdoses. Clear signs of foul play. Wagner's story matched perfectly. He rushed to the nearest police station to report it. The police, alarmed by the hospital's excessive death rates, took the tip seriously. Over 2 months, they launched a massive investigation, exhuming victims' remains. Autopsies uncovered evidence. Data revealed that from 1983 to 1987, Wagner's ward used 2,500 vials of Rohypnol, 7 times the norm. During her shifts, patient death surged over 5-fold. On April 7, 1989, the Sisterhood of Death was arrested. They confessed without remorse. During interrogations, police separated them, showing lists and photos of patients who died over 6 years, demanding identification. The 4 admitted to 49 murders, but the others pointed to Wagner as the mastermind. Unfazed, she confessed to 39 killings, recounting each in meticulous detail. Her accomplices insisted the toll was far higher, potentially hundreds, perhaps 300 victims. When asked why they targeted patients, Wagner's response was ice cold. Because I had the power. When the media broke the story, Austria reeled. In an era of hard-won peace, how could a prestigious public hospital harbor such a horrific scandal? The case evoked Joseph Mengele, the Nazi angel of death, who injected bacteria and viruses into living subjects for inhumane experiments, killing hundreds of thousands. Austria's then Prime Minister Fran Vernitsky called it the most brutal and horrifying crime in our nation's history. At the trial in March 1991, Wagner, perhaps fearing life behind bars, retracted her confession of 39 murders, admitting to only 10. But her crimes were undeniable. Before the court, the 4 culprits spun excuses, claiming they offered final care to end Patients suffering. In truth, Austria's laws are clear. Passive euthanasia. Ceasing treatment to let a patient die naturally, is legal only in rare cases. Active euthanasia, deliberately ending a patient's life, is strictly banned. Wagner's group wasn't driven by mercy. Their acts fed a sick psychological thrill. Based on evidence from doctors, nurses, and patients, the court delivered its verdict. Voltrad Wagner. Guilty of 15 murders, 17 attempted murders, and 2 assaults. Sentenced to life imprisonment. Irene Lidolf, guilty of 5 murders, sentenced to life imprisonment. Stephanie Amier, guilty of attempted murder and manslaughter with mitigating factors for coercion, sentenced to 20 years. Maria Gruber, guilty of attempted murder and manslaughter, leniency granted due to her youth, sentenced to 15 years. Here's the catch. Like most European nations, Austria abolished the death penalty long ago. Life imprisonment is the harshest punishment. But in practice, prisoners can be paroled after 15 years with good behavior. Stefania and Maria served 12 years walking free in 2003. 5 years later, Wagner and Irene were released for good conduct. The prison even arranged a shopping and haircut outing to ease their reintegration. Amid public outrage, both changed their names to blend back into society. Their crimes inspired a documentary, Murder Sisters. When the case closed, it left haunting questions. How could a public hospital allow such savagery? Why for 6 years did no one notice the hospital bore heavy blame? Its chaotic management failed to question the skyrocketing death rates. Wagner's direct supervisor was sacked and other leaders faced penalties. The scandal forced Lyons General Hospital to rebrand, shedding its cursed name. But this wasn't an isolated horror. In late 19th century Massachusetts, a serial killer nurse, Jane Toppin, emerged from a grim childhood. Orphaned at 6, she grew up in a poor house. Later becoming a servant. Treated well, she saved enough to train as a nurse at Cambridge Hospital in Boston, eventually becoming an intern. To boost her skills, Jane falsified medical records to keep patients hospitalized longer. Outwardly caring, she secretly poisoned them, tweaking doses to study their decline. Slowly, they died. At death's door, Jane would pry open their eyes, searching for their souls. Using common opioids for pain relief. Her overdoses killed indirectly, evading detection. Over time, she experimented with new poisons and methods, always covering her tracks. Working as a private nurse in Boston, she'd kill patients she grew bored with, often pilfering their money. When exposed, the court deemed her insane, sparing her a guilty verdict, but confining her to a mental hospital for life. In the 1980s, Richard Angelo, a Long Island nurse, craved hero status. Pushing patients to the brink of death, then saving them fed his ego. A certified nurse by 1985, he worked nights at a hospital for cardiac and critical patients, never complaining. Yet, the number of critical cases dropped inexplicably, raising eyebrows. One day after Angelo's injection, a patient felt paralyzed and struggled to breathe. With his last strength, he summoned help surviving after emergency care. An investigation followed. Police found syringes and dangerous drugs in Angelo's locker and home. He confessed to poisoning 2 patients a week to death in his final month. Exhuming over 30 graves, autopsies confirmed paralytic drugs. They estimated he targeted at least 35 people in 7 months, killing 10. In 1990, Angelo was convicted and remains in prison. Another angel of death, Britain's Harold Shipman, a general practitioner, is among the deadliest modern killers with an estimated 250 victims. First caught forging prescriptions, he resumed practice after rehab, even opening his own clinic to widespread praise. But his patients' death rates soared, sparking suspicion. Police found no evidence, initially closing the case. Then Hyde's mayor visited Shipman's clinic and never left alive. Shipman claimed old age, but the mayors were leaving $386,000, approximately $480 to $500. In June 2025 to Shipman and nothing to her children, raised red flags. It was forged. Autopsies revealed banned drugs. Shipman's reputation and falsified death. Certificates masked countless sudden deaths. Arrested in September 1998, he was linked to over 100 victims. His excuse sparing patients from suffering was a lie. Story 2. In 2022, Elon Musk sent shockwaves through the financial world when he boldly shelled out $44 billion to acquire Twitter, thrusting himself into the center of global attention. The deal seemed to fuel the billionaire's audacity, leading to a series of perplexing decisions. Mass layoffs, rehiring, and then more layoffs. Twitter's internal turmoil unfolded in rapid succession, turning many of Musk's admirers into critics almost overnight. But Musk didn't stop there. He continued to make headlines on Twitter with a string of provocative statements. In one particularly jaw-dropping post, he declared his next move, buying Coca-Cola to reintroduce cocaine into its original formula. His exact words were, "Next, I'm buying Coca-Cola to put the cocaine back in." Yet, as unpredictable and imaginative as Elon Musk may be, a man whose actions often defy expectation, he once crossed paths with someone even more audacious, someone whose daring vision and reckless ambition might have surpassed his own. In 2019, a young man with long flowing hair and a distinctly hippie vibe approached Musk. The moment he opened his mouth, he dropped a bombshell that left everyone in the room stunned. "I hear you're planning to send humans to Mars. Let me handle the entire infrastructure for that project. I'll build houses on Mars for you." Not only that, but the young man confidently presented a detailed plan complete with a projected budget of a staggering $1 trillion. Musk's initial instinct was to throw this madman out of the room. "Do you think I'm a fool? $1 trillion? Why don't you just fly straight into the sky yourself?" he retorted. But then he paused, caught off guard because the man standing before him was quite literally there to discuss flying into the sky. Still, Musk restrained his emotions. After all, this wasn't just some nobody. The man was the CEO of a tech company valued even higher than Musk's own SpaceX. So, who is this enigmatic figure? Let's take a step back and look at the landscape of top-valued private companies in 2018. Names like Airbnb, Stripe, and Elon Musk SpaceX were among the leaders. But towering above them all with a valuation of $150 billion was WeWork, a startup focused on shared workspaces. And the man bold enough to pitch a $1 trillion deal to Musk was none other than Adam Neumann, the founder and CEO of WeWork. Despite its lofty valuation, in Musk's eyes, WeWork held no real technological value. To him, it was nothing more than a real estate brokerage masquerading as a tech company, plain and simple. The notion struck him as utterly laughable. Yet to many investors at the time, Adam Neumann was a visionary entrepreneur, a daring dreamer who wasn't afraid to act on his ambitions. To WeWork's employees, he was a savior, a leader with a grand mission to change the world. To his family and friends, Adam Neumann was like 24-karat gold, wealthy, talented, and fiercely loyal to his wife. Unlike Musk or Jeff Bezos, billionaires who, after amassing their fortunes, quickly divorced their wives to pursue new lives, Adam Neumann was the epitome of a devoted husband. He not only met his wife's every demand without question, but even when she betrayed him, leading to a loss of 90% of his wealth, Adam harbored no resentment and never abandoned her. Though Adam Neumann remains a polarizing figure, one thing is undeniable. His imagination and audacity deserve recognition. Under the dazzling lights of New York, a city often likened to the pinnacle of the capitalist pyramid, Adam Neumann single-handedly set out to build a people's commune in the heart of this opulent metropolis. The driving force behind his audacious journey stemmed from a cryptic question posed by billionaire Masayoshi Son during their very first meeting. In a battle between a madman and a wise man, who would win? Rumor has it that if you answered correctly, Masayoshi Son would bestow upon you his golden finger, a metaphorical gesture symbolizing the immense backing of SoftBank, propelling you to the heights of success. So, what was Adam's answer and what was the correct response? First, let's rewind to 2002 when Adam was just 23 years old. With only $6,000 in his pocket, but a heart full of ambition, he arrived in New York alone, determined to chase his dreams. This wasn't his first time in the city, however. Adam Neumann was born into a Jewish family in Israel. His childhood took a sharp turn when his parents divorced at the age of 7. His mother, taking her 2 children, left their homeland for the United States to pursue her career as a medical resident. But life in a foreign land was far from easy. Adam struggled with dyslexia and a limited grasp of English, turning his education into a nightmare. He was bullied by his peers. His grades plummeted and the situation became so dire that his mother decided to take the family back to Israel to start anew. While the move brought emotional stability, their financial situation remained precarious. The family of 3 relied on women's and children's support centers, surviving on free meals provided by social welfare programs. But life has a way of surprising us. Back in a familiar environment, Adam's linguistic abilities seemed to awaken. Not only did he master Hebrew, Israel's official language, but he also became fluent in English, the very language that had once been his greatest obstacle. In America, he even began competing in bilingual debate tournaments, winning numerous awards. From a shy, struggling child, Adam transformed into a master communicator. After graduating high school, like all young Israelis, Adam enlisted in the military, serving for 5 years and leaving with the rank of captain. With a military stipend in hand, he returned to New York, enrolling at Baruch College to study business. This time, Adam felt more confident than ever, convinced he would make it big in the city of endless opportunities. But reality dealt him a harsh blow. After graduating, he bounced from job to job, even trying his luck on Wall Street. But he could never hold a position for more than a few months. His supervisors often remarked, "He talks a good game, but his skills can't keep up with his ambitions." Frustrated, Adam decided that if he couldn't succeed working for others, he would start his own business. He teamed up with his college friend and roommate, Miguel McKeely, to launch a children's clothing company called Crawlers. Their flagship product was a special pair of pants for infants, designed with padded knee protectors to help babies crawl comfortably. The irony, however, was that neither of these two young men had any experience as parents. Yet, they chose to venture into the baby clothing market. Predictably, the market taught them a brutal lesson. Their design was utterly unremarkable, and the oversized knee pads looked more like turtle shells than anything practical. To make matters worse, their advertising slogan lacked any real punch. "Babies crawl around, their knees hurt, but they can't say it. Don't worry, we've got them covered." Parents, on the other hand, had a different perspective. A pair of baby pants costing $50 to $60. We're not sure if the baby's knees hurt, but our wallets definitely will. And so this first entrepreneurial endeavor quickly hit a dead end. Broke and defeated, the two climbed to the rooftop of their rented apartment, cracked open a couple of beers, and began lamenting their lives. After downing a few cans, Miguel started reminiscing about his childhood. Growing up in a small town in Oregon, a place often considered a cradle of hippie culture. He never knew his biological father, only that he was raised by 5 women. That unconventional family, despite its quirks, gave him the happiest days of his life. They all lived under one roof with no concept of personal property. Everything was shared. The money they earned went into a tin box, and anyone who needed it could take what they required. They ate together, slept together, and raised the children collectively, much like an idealized communist community. Listening to Miguel's story, Adam felt a wave of nostalgia. When he first graduated, he had dreamed of making enough money to buy a house and build an empire. But looking back, his happiest moments were the carefree days spent crammed in a dorm with friends, chatting and playing games late into the night. Then a spark ignited in Adam's mind. Who says those happy days can't come back? We can absolutely tweak the concept, blending a communal model into a work environment, making it both fun and profitable. Inspired by the shared bike model, he came up with the concept of a shared office space. In a single building, different companies could work in a communal area, supporting each other while efficiently utilizing resources. The ground floor would feature a bar, a Starbucks, and all the amenities one could need, essentially a mini residential community. In short, Adam wanted to pull people out of the digital world and back into face-to-face interactions, creating a modern working community. After this grandiose brainstorming session, a gust of night air swept through, sobering them up as the alcohol wore off. They suddenly realized the idea was great. But where would the money come from? Having just failed in their last business venture, they were barely scraping by for food. How could they possibly fund a new startup? A few days later, Adam approached their landlord. With his silver tongue, he managed to convince the landlord to lease them an entire floor on an installment plan. Alongside this, the duo scrambled to secure a small bank loan, which they used to buy desks, chairs, a fax machine, a printer, and other basic supplies. And so, Green Desk, literally the Green Desk, was born. At the time, the United States was just emerging from the financial crisis. Those who had endured unemployment and struggled to find work had lost faith in large corporations, turning instead to entrepreneurship. However, these micro businesses often lacked the funds to afford expensive office spaces in New York. It was at this precise moment that Adam's Green Desk seized the advantage with its pricing model. Not only did they offer monthly leases, but they also provided even shorter-term options down to just a few weeks. Adam took flexibility a step further by renting out individual desks. For just $50 a month, clients could secure a spot in a professional office building, complete with the prestige needed to meet clients and host meetings. Beyond that, they enjoyed perks like free coffee and an in-house bar. For startups, this was nothing short of paradise. Thanks to this model, within a short time, the entire building was fully occupied, allowing Adam and Miguel to earn their first profits as middlemen leasing office space. Riding this wave of success, they even roped their landlord into a partnership, expanding to more shared office buildings in the surrounding area. Everything went so smoothly that Adam began to dream bigger, conquering Manhattan, the bustling epicenter of New York, to truly make a name for himself. Without hesitation, Adam and Miguel sold Green to their landlord for $500,000. With that capital, they founded a new company with a far more grandiose name: WeWork. To make a strong impression on investors, Adam boldly inflated the company's valuation, a classic hype tactic in the startup world. It was at this pivotal moment that Adam met the second big wallet of his life, his future wife, Rebecca Paltrow. Interestingly, the actress who played Pepper Potts in Iron Man, Gwyneth Paltrow, is her cousin. Born into a wealthy Jewish family, Rebecca had lived a life of luxury from a young age. Watching her cousin shine in Hollywood, she too once dreamed of becoming an actress. However, her unremarkable looks and lackluster acting skills relegated her to minor background roles for years. Despite her struggles in the entertainment industry, Rebecca never had to worry about money. She studied business in college but found it uninspiring, switching midway to Buddhist studies. After graduating, her family arranged a job for her on Wall Street, hoping she'd gain experience before taking over the family business. But just 3 weeks into the role, Rebecca declared she was too exhausted and quit. In the end, she settled for a temporary gig as a yoga instructor at a fitness center. It was at a party that she met Adam. Upon realizing Rebecca was a true bifui, a Chinese term for a wealthy, fair-skinned beauty, Adam launched into a relentless pursuit. Not long after, the two were planning their wedding. To win over this eyes, Adam knew he had to polish his image to perfection. When founding WeWork, he didn't hesitate to hype the company's value to an astronomical figure. That inflated valuation was like a glittering layer of gold wrapped around the company. But Rebecca's father, a seasoned businessman with years of experience, saw right through the ploy. Still, his beloved daughter was determined to marry Adam. So he kept his thoughts to himself, offering only a knowing smile. Not only that, but on their wedding day, he generously gifted the young couple a lavish dowry, $1 million in cash. Marrying into a wealthy family, Adam truly reached the pinnacle of his life. With his father-in-law's backing, WeWork rapidly expanded across New York, securing one contract after another and growing at a breathtaking pace. In return for this support, Adam tirelessly helped his wife chase her acting dreams. But perhaps Rebecca was never meant for the entertainment world. After repeated failures, she reluctantly gave up her aspirations of stardom, settling into the role of a full-time homemaker. Still, she didn't shy away from embracing the life of a wealthy socialite, eventually giving Adam 6 children. As a eyes born with a silver spoon, Rebecca was determined that her children would enjoy the same luxurious upbringing she had. Each child was to have 2 personal nannies, grow up with their own private villa, and most importantly, achieve financial independence from the moment they were born. With 12 nannies, 6 villas, and trust funds worth millions of dollars for each child, even a billionaire like Bill Gates might have raised an eyebrow at such demands. But Adam, utterly devoted to his wife, agreed without a second thought. In fact, he went further, declaring, "We can't wait until the kids are grown to buy houses. We need to start now." Easier said than done. Where would the money come from? While WeWork was doing well, the shared office model lacked any significant technological barriers to entry. It didn't take long for the market to become flooded with imitators. These copycat companies couldn't match WeWork's amenities or brand, but they offered a compelling advantage: much lower rental prices. For cash-strapped startups, choosing a workspace that cost a few $100s less per month was an obvious consideration. As WeWork expanded its market share to 30%, the company began to hit a wall. Fierce competition eroded profits and losses started piling up at an alarming rate. Investors, growing increasingly impatient, repeatedly threatened to pull their funding. During one heated argument with an investor, Adam overheard a frustrated outburst. "Do you think everyone is as rich as SoftBank?" The mention of SoftBank immediately caught Adam's attention. He opened his laptop and began searching. The first name that popped up was Masayoshi Son, the Japanese investment mogul. After reading about the billionaire's string of spectacularly successful deals, Adam had an epiphany. This was the golden goose he needed to pursue. Without wasting a moment, Adam booked a flight to India where Masayoshi's son was attending a conference. On the plane, he immersed himself in research about the billionaire he was about to meet. Masayoshi's son, a man of Korean descent, raised in Japan, had faced significant discrimination due to his background. Seizing on this, Adam cleverly leveraged his own childhood story. A Jewish child growing up between the United States and Israel, constantly navigating 2 vastly different cultures to make an impression on Masayoshi. He recounted his tale with such raw emotion that even he found himself on the verge of tears. But Masayoshi's son remained unmoved. As a veteran in the investment world, he heard countless startup pitches every day, ranging from tragic to legendary, from heartwarming to thrilling, spanning every genre imaginable. But he wasn't a philanthropist. he was a businessman and his sole goal was to make money. After years in the cutthroat world of finance, he had forged a heart of steel, impervious to even the most dazzling stories. Yet this time, seeing a young man who had chased him halfway across the globe for a chance, Masayoshi maintained his courtesy and posed a single question. In a battle between a madman and a wise man, who would win? Adam paused for a few seconds, then answered with unwavering conviction. The madman. As he spoke, his eyes blazed with fiery passion. For a fleeting moment, Masayoshi's son seemed to freeze. That look, that fire, he had seen it before. Many years ago. Another young man had carried the same intensity in his gaze. Back then, that young man was a penniless entrepreneur, with nothing to his name. But with that same resolute look, he had convinced Masayoshi to invest $20 million in his company. 20 years later, that investment had ballooned into $150 billion, a staggering $7,500-fold return. That young man was none other than Jack Ma. The memory stirred something in Masayoshi's son. Could it be that the young man standing before him now was the next Jack Ma? 4 months later, Masayoshi's son flew to New York to see Wei work for himself. What he encountered was a company brimming with vitality. The workspace was spacious and airy with every detail exuding sophistication. The pantry area was bright and tidy, and the entire office was designed in the Japanese wabi-sabi style, simple yet elegant. But what impressed him most wasn't the decor. It was the people. Here, there were no weary employees dragging themselves through endless overtime. Instead, everyone radiated energy, laughing and chatting with enthusiasm. At Wei work, Mondays were the happiest day of the week, and overtime was seen as a reward. This vibrant atmosphere perfectly aligned with Masayoshi's son's taste. When Adam rushed out to greet him, still fumbling to put on his shoes properly, his hurried and passionate demeanor suddenly reminded Masayoshi's son of his younger self. In that moment, the deal felt destined. Masayoshi's son patted Adam on the shoulder and uttered a life-changing statement for WeWork. Money isn't an issue. From now on, your godfather will take care of you. He then pulled out a contract. SoftBank would officially invest in WeWork, starting with an initial sum of $460 million. With SoftBank's backing, Adam became unstoppable like a tiger sprouting wings. Over the next 2 years, he aggressively acquired and crushed competitors in the industry, boosting WeWork's market share from 30% to 95%. Eventually reaching a complete 100% monopoly in New York. At the same time, he expanded globally, establishing a presence in over 100 countries. WeWork office buildings sprang up in some of the world's most expensive real estate markets, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Shanghai, and beyond. In just a few years, Adam transformed from an unknown into a business legend, standing shoulder to shoulder with the likes of Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. Money poured in like a river, and Adam began to indulge. Private jets, supercars, gold-plated mansions. Every item he owned reared of wealth. But Adam wasn't the only one reeling in this opulence. His wife, Rebecca, was no less extravagant. She didn't settle for the typical purchases of a wealthy socialite, like designer bags or glittering jewelry. Instead, she decided to buy entire companies. In the past, she had dreamed of being an actress, but never landed a role. So now she bought an entire theater. If the gym near their home was too crowded, no problem. Adam would buy a building and turn it into a private fitness center just for her. When their children's education suffered due to constant travel and teachers complained, that wasn't an issue either. She simply opened a school. And if the new school struggled to hire quality teachers, the solution was straightforward. Buy a teacher training center inspired by the WeWork name. Rebecca went on to create a series of We brands. We Fit, a chain of fitness centers. We Grow, a school for the next generation. We Sleep, a project focused on bedroom furniture to improve sleep quality. And even We Eat, a chain of vegan restaurants. Had WeChat not already been trademarked, she might have bought that app, too. Yet, no matter how many companies she launched, the public still saw Rebecca as merely Adam's wife. Unwilling to accept this, she demanded a position on WeWork's leadership team, a role nearly equivalent to CEO. Remarkably, Adam, who worshipped his wife to the heavens, not only agreed, but created a brand new title just for her, Chief Brand and Impact Officer. However, once in this role, Rebecca didn't focus on strategy or company growth. Instead, she introduced a bizarre rule. She banned all employees from eating meat. A staunch vegan, she believed meat brought negative energy, disrupting the company's key. From the office cafeteria to employees' personal lunch boxes, not a trace of meat was allowed. Every lunchtime, Rebecca would stride through the office like a queen on a royal inspection, leading a team of enforcers to check for violations. If someone dared to sneak a piece of meat or a sausage, they were immediately ordered to pack up and go home. A second offense meant instant termination. The employees, no matter how frustrated, had to grit their teeth and endure. Adam had painted a rosy picture for them. The day we went public, long-term employees would receive shares. This wasn't just any company. It was valued at hundreds of billions of dollars. Even a small slice of that pie could change their lives forever. The most anxious party wasn't the employees, but WeWork's godfather, SoftBank, and its leader, Masayoshi Son. Initially, he had invested $460 million into WeWork, but Adam kept finding ways to extract more funds. By the time the total investment reached tens of billions of dollars, Masayoshi's son began to feel uneasy. What was even more alarming was that WeWork had never turned a profit. A company burning through billions of dollars without generating a single cent of profit. How could that be acceptable? As the tech investment bubble began to burst, even SoftBank faced financial difficulties. At this point, Masayoshi's son could no longer pour endless money into Adam's venture. He demanded that Adam seek funding from another group of investors, such as the oil tycoons from Abu Dhabi. If Masayoshi's son was Adam's godfather, these Arab billionaires were his grandfathers. But for reasons unknown, Adam managed to offend even these deep-pocketed patrons. At a crucial meeting, he brazenly stood them up. A group of billionaires waited patiently for 40 minutes. But Adam was nowhere to be seen. His arrogance infuriated them and they promptly boarded their private jets, flying straight back to the Middle East. Realizing he had caused a disaster, Adam frantically called Masayoshi's son, claiming his assistant had mixed up the schedule due to time zone differences and pleaded for his godfather to help mend the relationship. But this time, Masayoshi's son had run out of patience. He gave his unruly godson a stern lecture before hanging up. As a businessman, you can't even manage something as basic as being on time. You've embarrassed me enough. From now on, SoftBank's money will no longer flow into WeWork's pockets. Figure it out yourself. Left with no other choice, Adam was forced to accelerate plans for an IPO, initial public offering. After all, WeWork was a high-profile brand, and several Wall Street giants immediately expressed interest. J.P. Morgan Chase even offered a valuation of $490 billion, willing to support Adam, provided everything was transparent. But when the auditors stepped in, they were stunned by what they uncovered. Not only was WeWork hemorrhaging tens of millions of dollars each month, but Adam and Rebecca had been secretly siphoning off company funds for years. For example, they had quietly registered all the We brand names like We Grow, We Fit, and We Sleep under their personal names, then forced the company to pay over $5 million to buy them back from themselves. That wasn't all. They also played a game of buying real estate under their personal names only to lease it back to WeWork. In other words, the company, which appeared to be in the business of renting spaces, was actually renting from its own CEO, Adam. All the investments in projects like the school, vegan restaurants, and gyms were made in the company's name. But in reality, the money flowed straight into Adam and Rebecca's pockets. It was a classic money from the left pocket to the right pocket scheme, with Rebecca skimming off a hefty chunk each time the funds moved. At this point, people realized the We and WeWork was nothing but a sham. Flip it around and it was simply me, as in me alone. When the truth came to light, J.P. Morgan Chase backed out, shaking their heads in disbelief. If Adam wanted to proceed with the IPO, there was only one option: drastically lower the company's valuation. The figure they proposed was $37 billion. From $490 billion to $37 billion, this plummeting drop was nothing short of cutting off Adam's legs. Under the pressure of avoiding bankruptcy, Adam had no choice but to push forward with the IPO preparations, hoping to find another big player with pockets as deep as SoftBank's. But at this critical moment, his fear of his wife flared up again for a document as crucial as the IPO filing. Adam entrusted the task to his wife, Rebecca, to write on his behalf. The problem was, what qualifications did Rebecca have beyond her prestigious family name? She had spent a few months in a monastery during college and turned on Wall Street for less than 3 weeks, and her writing skills were, to put it mildly, questionable. The result was an IPO filing that read more like a fantastical speech filled with lofty rhetoric about entrepreneurship and WeWork's promising future. She didn't just talk about world peace and the abolition of class divides. She emphasized equality for all of humanity, sounding more like an endless sermon on morality. Not only that, Rebecca shoehorned her school project into the IPO portfolio, claiming it would unlock the hidden superpowers of children. And to top it all off, she boldly declared herself as WeWork's successor. Her husband's business, she decided, would become a family enterprise with her holding the reins indefinitely. Investors reading the IPO filing couldn't believe their eyes. No one could fathom how a couple could be so reckless or produce such an absurd financial document. It might have been entertaining to read, but no one was willing to invest in it. And with that, the dream of an IPO went up in smoke. As WeWork descended into chaos, someone finally stepped up to fight back. Miguel McKelvey, the co-founder who had long been relegated to the background by Adam. Quiet and unassuming, Miguel had spent years playing second fiddle, letting Adam take the spotlight. But after reading the IPO filing, he could no longer hold back his outrage. What the hell is this? Since when did his wife become a company founder? And she wants to pass the throne to herself. Does she think I don't even exist? Furious, Miguel decided to take action. He reached out to the Wall Street Journal and exposed every scandal he had witnessed firsthand. What Adam and Rebecca had done went far beyond mere embezzlement. They had evaded taxes, laundered money, and shockingly, Adam was heavily addicted to clover, a slang term for marijuana. Even more alarming, evidence surfaced that Adam had once planned to use a private jet to smuggle a large quantity of illegal substances into Israel. This series of revelations detonated like a nuclear bomb, sending WeWork's reputation into a free fall. The company's board of directors immediately convened an emergency meeting, and with an overwhelming vote, they decided Adam had to go. But ousting Adam couldn't save the sinking ship. At this point, WeWork was like a terminal cancer patient. Removing the primary tumor did little when the cancer had already metastasized beyond repair. To make matters worse, even after being removed as CEO, Adam still held 60% of the company's shares. With no other options, Miguel turned to the only person who might be able to salvage the situation, Masayoshi Son. He pleaded with SoftBank to buy out Adam's shares, hoping to perform a major surgery to save the company. After some deliberation, Masayoshi's son finally agreed to step in once more. After all, he had already poured tens of billions of dollars into WeWork. Letting it collapse would not only mean a massive financial loss, but also a direct blow to his reputation as the world's top investor. So, SoftBank injected an additional $1.7 billion, officially taking ownership of WeWork. And so after burning through tens of billions of other people's money, Adam and Rebecca not only succeeded in destroying the company, but also walked away with billions in their pockets, retiring early to enjoy a life of luxury with their enormous fortune. The ones who suffered the most, aside from the large and small investors, were WeWork's employees. For years, Adam had paid them below market wages, dangling the promise of stock options once the company went public. That carrot on a stick had kept them loyal. But now, with the IPO dream shattered, their hopes of striking it rich vanished, too. Worse still, the company didn't even have enough money to pay severance packages. The employees couldn't leave, nor did they have any choice but to continue working for meager salaries, clinging to the faint hope that a miracle might occur as the company reinvented itself. But before we rush to condemn the ruthless nature of capitalism or cry foul over the injustice, this story has one more unexpected twist. The one to deliver a form of divine justice this time was none other than the coronavirus. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic turned remote work into the dominant trend. effectively sounding the death knell for the shared office industry. Citing a severe drop in the company's value, SoftBank immediately canceled the remaining $1.7 billion payment they had promised Adam. No one could have imagined that a financial titan like Masayoshi Son would so blatantly renege on a deal. Furious at losing his golden prize, Adam sued Masayoshi Son, while former WeWork employees also filed lawsuits against Adam for low wages and labor law violations. Not to be outdone, SoftBank turned around and accused Adam and Rebecca of financial fraud, claiming they had deceived the firm. What followed was a chaotic legal battle with lawsuits flying back and forth, each party refusing to back down. These legal disputes are expected to drag on for years, possibly even a decade. And until the dust settles, Adam's billionaire dreams may remain just that, a distant fantasy. Let's circle back to Masayoshi Son's original question. In a battle between a madman and a wise man, who would win? It turns out this was a trick question. The real answer is the stronger one wins. Because no matter how smart or crazy you are, if you're up against someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger, you'd have no choice but to submit. And in the game of capitalism, the one with the most money always comes out on top. Story 3. Now, we'll dive into a chilling case ranked among Singapore's 9 most horrific crimes of 2000. At the crime scene, aside from a single key, no other clues were found. This shocking murder sent shockwaves through Singapore like a storm, leaving the nation in disbelief. So, what happened that year? Now, let's travel back to the year 2000 to explore this bizarre murder case in Singapore. Singapore is likely a familiar name to many of you. While our channel has covered several cases from this country, it's actually a very safe place. According to the 2024 Global Peace Index, Singapore ranks 5th among the world's most peaceful nations and has repeatedly been rated the 2nd most peaceful country in the Asia-Pacific region. The laws here are strict with harsh penalties. For instance, littering in Singapore can result in a fine of up to $2,000 Singapore dollars for a first offense, and repeat offenders may face fines as high as $10,000 Singapore dollars. Under such stringent legal oversight, violent crimes in Singapore are relatively rare. Yet, even in the safest places, there are always those willing to take risks. Like the story we're about to explore today. August 9, 2000 was Singapore's National Day. The entire nation was filled with joy, streets adorned with vibrant decorations, and the country immersed in celebration. But in a quiet corner of the city, a gruesome scene was unfolding. Chestnut Avenue, Bukit Bad, Singapore, a serene area near the city's largest nature park, known for its clean environment. 3 middle school students were cycling through, heading to school for a National Day celebration. They were chatting and laughing as they rode. But as they reached a secluded stretch of road, one of them suddenly stopped. The boy stared at the roadside bushes and said, "Listen, I think someone's here." His 2 friends looked skeptical. "In a remote place like this, who'd be here?" they replied. Unconvinced by their doubts, the boy cautiously approached the bushes. The moment he parted the grass, a blood-soaked body appeared before him. The sight was so horrifying that he screamed, scrambling back in terror. The 3 students immediately reported the discovery to the police. Upon receiving the report, the police rushed to the scene. After examination, they confirmed the victim was a middle-aged man with multiple bruises on his head. The fatal wounds were 4 deep stab marks to the chest, each one lethal. The estimated time of death was within the past 12 to 24 hours. Strangely, despite the severity of the injuries, there were no defensive wounds on the victim's body. The coroner deduced that at the time of the attack, the victim was either unconscious or restrained, unable to fight back. The crime scene was in a remote area with no surveillance cameras. The police split into 3 teams to search the surrounding area, eventually finding a key with a metal ring in nearby bushes. Beyond that, no other clues were uncovered. Through DNA analysis, the victim's identity was confirmed. Kong Gaap Yong, a 42-year-old taxi driver, father of 3, and a man with a happy family life. According to his family, Ko had driven his daughter to school around 6:10 a.m. on August 8, after which he lost contact. That evening, when he didn't return home, his wife reported him missing to the police. Tragically, the next day, she received the devastating news of his murder. After investigating and gathering information, the police learned that Kong Gapian was a kind, honest man who loved his family deeply and had no known enemies, allowing them to tentatively rule out a revenge killing. Additionally, when found, the victim's money had been completely taken, leading the police to suspect that greed may have been the motive. They believe the key to solving this case lay with Kong Gapiang's taxi license plate SHB540C. Since the vehicle wasn't at the crime scene, it's likely the killer drove it away after the murder. The police mobilized a large force, launching an extensive search. At around 4:55 p.m. on August 10, the police finally located Kong Gapiang's taxi in the parking lot of Block 628A, Buabatic Central. Unfortunately, only the vehicle was found. The killer had been meticulous, leaving no fingerprints behind. The police set up an ambush in the area for several days, but came up empty-handed. On August 26, 18 days had passed since Kong Gapiang's murder. While the police were still grappling with that case, another horrific killing shook the city. A witness reported seeing 2 men openly using a gun to commit murder on the Jalan Kukoh overpass. The act was shockingly brazen. Singapore is known as one of the safest countries in the world with strict gun control laws. For someone to dare fire a gun in broad daylight on a public street was nothing short of reckless. When the police arrived at the scene, the crowd of curious onlookers on the overpass had long dispersed. All that remained was the body of a middle-aged man lying on the ground, his face disfigured with bullet wounds to his head and chest. Blood splattered everywhere. Through investigation, the victim was identified as Jabber Sathik, a 39-year-old currency exchange businessman born in India. He was a permanent resident of Singapore. On the day of the incident, Sathik had just finished work at a bank. Moments after stepping outside, he was ambushed by robbers. Despite agreeing to hand over his money, the thugs shot him mercilessly. This brutal scene unfolded in a bustling central area with many passers-by and several witnesses saw the attack. The case quickly made headlines and became a trending topic online. In just 18 days, 2 murders had struck Singapore back-to-back. After hearing the news, the public was gripped by fear, worried they might one day face a similar fate. Authorities issued an urgent order to solve the cases as quickly as possible. The police still had no leads on Kong Yi-Yang's murder. And now, with another case on their hands, the pressure to crack both was unimaginable. According to witnesses at the scene, there were two perpetrators, both armed with guns. They demanded Sathik hand over his money before taking his life. The forensics team found a bullet casing near the overpass, but unfortunately the killers had disguised themselves and no one saw their faces. At this point, Sathik's family provided a lead for the investigation. They mentioned that due to his job, Sathik always carried a phone with him, usually keeping it in the same bag as his money. That day, the robbers had taken Sathik's bag, and the family suggested the killers might not have discarded the phone, offering a potential clue. With a better-than-nothing mindset, the police decided to check. To their surprise, they hit a breakthrough. Sathik's phone was still being used by the perpetrators, either out of sheer stupidity or blatant disregard for the police. Police technicians meticulously analyzed the phone's call logs, eventually identifying three suspects: Camille, 33, Ibrahim, 35, and Rosli, 30. On October 15, the police launched their operation. To ensure a smooth arrest, they devised a detailed plan, splitting into 3 teams to act simultaneously. In the end, they successfully apprehended all 3 suspects. After verification, Camille and Ibrahim were confirmed as the culprits who robbed and killed Sathik. During a search of Camille's apartment, the police discovered a Smith & Wesson revolver, a Colt semi-automatic pistol, and 8 pairs of handcuffs. However, there were only 7 corresponding handcuff keys. One was missing. The officers stared at the keys with an eerie sense of familiarity, as if they had seen them before. Suddenly, it clicked. Weren't these identical to the key found at Kong Gaap-yong's crime scene? It was like finding a needle in a haystack. Kong Gaap-yong's murder might also be linked to these men. While investigating the 3 suspects, a friend of Camille provided a crucial tip, revealing that Camille had a locker at the Koashchikakong shopping center where he often hid suspicious items. Acting on this lead, the police rushed to Koashchukong and sure enough found a dagger wrapped in newspaper inside the locker. This was no ordinary dagger. It was a standard military bayonet about 13 cm long with an extremely sharp blade, serrated on one side and designed to be attached to a rifle. Though the dagger appeared clean, the Singapore Health Sciences Authority detected traces of blood inside its handle. DNA testing confirmed the blood belonged to Kong Gaap-yong. Additionally, the police verified that the 7 keys recovered from Kamal's apartment matched the key found at Kong Gaap-yong's crime scene in structure, design, and size. Moreover, they perfectly fit the 8th pair of handcuffs. With this, Camille was now tied to Kong Gaap-yong's murder with undeniable evidence. Seeing their crimes exposed and knowing they could no longer hide, the 2 accomplices sought leniency by confessing their involvement in Kong Gaap-yong's murder. The Singapore police breathed a sigh of relief. After months of investigation, the case was finally coming to light and they could report progress to the public. But the story doesn't end there. The 3 suspects were transferred to Singapore's High Court to await trial, and the real drama was just beginning. On October 18, 2000, the prosecution charged Camille, Ibrahim, and Rosli with first-degree murder. What followed was a complex trial. Sadik's case was straightforward due to eyewitness accounts, making the sentencing relatively simple. However, the trial for Kong Gapiang's murder proved far more complicated. With no witnesses, the court had to rely on the suspect's statements to reconstruct the truth. But their accounts starkly contradicted each other, resembling a classic Rashomon scenario. The three turned on each other in court, skillfully shifting blame and pointing fingers, each desperate to evade responsibility. Let's start with Camille's testimony. He stated, "A while back, I traveled to Thailand and bought 2 handguns and a dagger for self-defense. Perfectly reasonable. On August 8 at around 10:45 a.m., I brought these items to meet Ibrahim and Rosli at a cafe in Western Bidak. They were both broke and didn't want to work. So we discussed robbing a jeweler's store. That day, I carried a handgun loaded with 6 bullets, a Colt semi-automatic. I prepared a backpack for Rosli, an Adidas one containing the dagger, a pair of handcuffs, a mask, and gloves. For Ibrahim, I packed a Timberland backpack with a Smith & Wesson handgun, another pair of handcuffs, a mask, and a hammer. Before we acted, Rosli suggested we secure a getaway car first. Waiting to call a taxi after the robbery would be too risky. It made sense, so we planned to steal a car. But after an hour of trying, not only did we fail to steal a vehicle, we nearly got caught by patrolling police. At that point, Rosli came up with another idea. We'd stop a taxi, restrain the driver, and release him after robbing the jeweler's store. I was hesitant about this plan, but before I could decide, they had already flagged down a taxi. The driver was Konapiong. Ibrahim sat in the front passenger seat, while Rosli and I sat in the back. I wanted to head straight to Woodlands, where there are plenty of jeweler stores and banks. Easy targets. But the other two thought we should restrain the driver first. There's a secluded spot on Chestnut Avenue. Perfect for hiding someone. So, we went there. Once we arrived, they threatened the driver to get out of the car. Terrified, he kept pleading, "Don't kill me. Don't kill me. I'll give you all my money." To intimidate him, I pulled out my handgun, and waved it around. It worked. He got out immediately, and tried to run. Rosli quickly grabbed him, cuffed his hands with the handcuffs, and dragged him into the bushes. A minute or two later, Rosli came out of the bushes with the dagger covered in blood and the handcuffs in hand. He said he'd stabbed the driver 3 or 4 times. This was completely off script. Our original plan was just to steal the car, not to harm anyone, but the deed was done and there was no turning back. We had to leave the scene. Ibrahim then drove us to Woodlands. In the car, we split over 500 Singapore dollars from the driver's wallet. Woodlands has plenty of jewellery stores, but the incident left us rattled, so we didn't dare act rashly. We decided to disguise ourselves, buy new shirts, get haircuts. While they were getting their haircut, I scouted the nearby jeweler stores and noticed cameras everywhere. So, we abandoned the robbery plan entirely. After wandering around Woodlands with nothing to show for it, we returned to Bitbadak. Ibrahim handled the car, wiping down fingerprints while Rosli and I waited for him at the subway station. Once he returned, we watched a movie, then each went home. Around 5 o'clock p.m., I got home, took a shower, and planned to throw away the jeans I'd worn and the dagger. But the dagger was expensive, and I couldn't bear to part with it. I cleaned it, applied anti-rust oil, wrapped it in newspaper, and stored it with another dagger I'd bought long ago in my locker. Later, I started to worry. If the crime ever came to light, and the police came knocking, that dagger would be damning evidence. Plus, it had harmed someone and keeping it felt like bad luck, so I threw it away. I want to emphasize again, I never intended to harm the driver. Rosli acted on his own and killed him. I deeply regret what happened that day, but Khan Jiang's death truly has nothing to do with me. That was Kamal's full account of the events. Interestingly, when disposing of the dagger, he mixed it up with another similar one and threw away the wrong knife. Perhaps this was fate at work. In his testimony, Kamal tried to paint himself as a mere follower who only supplied the weapons, claiming the real decisions were made by the other two. But is that the truth? Ibrahim and Rosli also gave their versions of the events that day. While their accounts largely aligned with Kamal's, there were key differences in certain details. Most crucially, both insisted that Kamal was the true mastermind behind the crime. Ibrahim stated, Kamal approached Rosli first, showing him the two guns and proposing the robbery plan. At first, Rosli hesitated, but after a few meetings, he wavered. Not only did he agree to the robbery, but he also roped me in to help because of my driving skills. In early July 2000, the three of us met and officially planned the heist. In reality, Kamal's initial target wasn't a jewel or a store. He had bigger ambitions, aiming to rob cash and transit couriers. On August 8, we waited near an ATM for a long time. But after spotting the police, we had to abandon the plan to rob cash directly. As for stealing the car and killing the driver afterward, I had no part in that. I was just the driver. Rosli echoed this, claiming that Kamal orchestrated everything, being the first to suggest stealing the car and killing the driver. On the way, he directed us to Chestnut Avenue, a place he knew well. When we arrived, he pulled out his gun and ordered the driver to get out. The moment the driver saw the gun, he tried to run. Kamal handed me a pair of handcuffs and told me to stop him. At first, I only planned to hide the driver in the bushes. He kept begging me, saying he had a family and children. I didn't want to harm him, but Kamal forced me at gunpoint, ordering me to act quickly. I had no choice but to comply, stabbing the driver 4 or 5 times in the left chest, then taking the handcuffs in his wallet. When I returned to the car, I was trembling with fear. Camo, cold as ice, said, "This is the price of betrayal." I swear from start to finish, I never intended to harm the driver. It was all under Kamal's coercion. I begged the court for a chance to repent and make amends. In Rosli's testimony, we hear a completely different story. He portrays himself as a pitiful figure forced into the crime while casting Kamal as a cold-blooded monster who initiated all the wrongdoing. Each of the three spun their own narrative, blaming the others and distorting the truth. The judge sifted through their chaotic testimonies, confirming key details of the crime. 1. Camo was the mastermind and the one who supplied the weapons. 2. Rosalie was the one who directly killed Kang Jae-ong. 3. The three suspects shared the intent to rob and together they committed Kang Jae-ong's murder. As a criminal gang, none of them could escape responsibility. Faced with these findings, the defense lawyers for the three suspects raised objections. Camel's lawyer argued Camel didn't inflict any injuries on the driver, nor did he intend to harm anyone. The one who actually killed Kang Jae-ong was Rosalie. Only Rosalie had that motive among the three. Rosalie's lawyer countered, if Camel hadn't threatened him with a gun, Rosalie would never have stabbed the driver. His plan was only to hide the driver, not to kill anyone. Ibrahim's lawyer stated his role in the entire incident was merely that of a driver. He never participated in any criminal acts. They were all planned by Camel and Rosalie. Therefore, he's innocent. Ibrahim's lawyer stated his role in the entire incident was merely that of a driver. He never participated in any criminal acts. They were all planned by Camel and Rosalie. Therefore, he's innocent. The three defense lawyers argued fiercely in court, each showcasing their skills. They fought tooth and nail to secure the maximum leniency for their clients. Notably, one of Rosalie's lawyers, David Razif, would, 5 years after this case, embark on a criminal path himself, becoming one of Singapore's most wanted fugitives. He defrauded clients of approximately 11.3 million Singapore dollars and some gold before fleeing the country in 2006, but that's a story for another time. In response to the defense arguments, the judge provided clear reasoning for the convictions. As the mastermind, Camel not only supplied the weapons, but played a central role throughout the crime. He gave the handgun to Ibrahim and the dagger to Rosalie, clearly anticipating that these weapons would be used. If not, why would he have gone to the trouble of buying them in Thailand and distributing them to his accomplices? More damningly, before they got into the taxi, Camel explicitly told Rosalie to eliminate Koan Gaap Young. While Rosalie carried out the killing, Camel stood guard with his gun, later ordering Ibrahim to wipe down the taxi to erase fingerprints. All of this reveals him to be a cunning and dangerous criminal with a ruthless mind. As for Ibrahim, his defense hinged on two main points. First, he claimed he didn't participate in the murder, and second, he insisted he was unaware of Rosalie's intent to kill the driver. This was a clear attempt to downplay his role. Throughout the incident, Ibrahim remained in the car waiting to pick up his two accomplices, which shows he implicitly agreed to the crime from the start and was complicit in it. His claim of not knowing Rosalie intended to kill the driver lacks credibility. When the driver got out of the car, Rosalie had already drawn the dagger, and Camel had even pulled out his gun. Rosalie then dragged the driver into the bushes with the dagger in hand. His intent to commit a crime was obvious. There's no way I could have been unaware. His defense was merely a pretense of ignorance, an attempt to evade responsibility. Finally, there's Rosalie, who repeatedly claimed Camel forced him to act. Yet, despite the victim's desperate pleas, Rosalie showed no mercy. Moreover, if he were truly coerced, there would have Been no need to brutally stab the driver 4 times, each strike fatal. Even after committing such a vicious act, he calmly removed the handcuffs and took the driver's wallet. These actions reveal that Rosely wasn't coerced. He was simply trying to escape accountability. The judge stated, when a crime is committed by multiple individuals, each person bears responsibility as if they had acted alone. If you knowingly join a criminal group with a clear understanding of its purpose, you cannot seek leniency or exemption from responsibility by claiming you were later forced by your accomplices. Simply put, if you willingly participate in a crime, you must face the consequences. On September 5, 2001, after 19 days of trial, the High Court delivered its final verdict, sentencing all 3 men to death for murder. The judge noted facing the death penalties, all 3 initially disagreed and filed appeals. However, Camel eventually withdrew his appeal and accepted the death sentence. On February 18, 2002, the court rejected Rosely and Ibrahim's appeals. In reality, even if their appeals had succeeded, Camel and Ibrahim couldn't have escaped the death penalty. They had already killed Safik in a separate unlawful armed robbery, so their fate was sealed regardless. On October 25, 2002, the 3 were executed by hanging at Changi Prison in Singapore, bringing this tragic chapter to a close. That concludes today's video. Reflecting on these 2 cases, they sparked heated discussions in Singapore, drawing immense public attention. The cases not only deepened the public's awareness of the cold-blooded brutality of criminals, but also prompted the government to strengthen law enforcement and public safety measures. Of course, they also serve as a reminder to citizens that even in a country with strict laws and strong public order, crime can still occur. So, vigilance and self-protection are always necessary. Story 4. We all know that taking a life is easy. It's covering up the crime that's hard. Yet along Interstate 45 in the United States, stretching from Houston to Galveston, a chilling series of horrific crimes has unfolded over more than 30 years. Here, all it takes to get away with murder is to find a roadside forest and dump the victim's body. Over 30 women and young girls have vanished, been assaulted, and brutally murdered in this area. What's most terrifying is that there wasn't just one killer, but a group of ruthless perpetrators operating in this region. Some even say if you want to commit a crime, come here. The police are powerless. This stretch of highway has earned a grim nickname, the Crime Sanctuary. Now, let's travel back to 1984 to uncover the chilling details of this story. Located in the south-central United States, Texas is the second largest state in the country and has a controversial distinction. It extremely lacks gun control laws. With a population of 29 million, Texas leads the U.S. in privately owned firearms, boasting over 1 million guns, double the number in Florida, the state in second place. Tragically, in 2021, Texas also topped the nation in gun-related deaths. Despite a string of mass shootings, many Texans remain steadfast in their belief in the right to bear arms, viewing guns as the best means of self-defense rather than relying on police protection. Tim Miller is a father who lost all faith in law enforcement. He had a daughter named Laura Lynn Miller. Born on July 17, 1968, Laura was a lovable girl with a natural talent for music. Once a member of her school's choir, but fate dealt her a cruel hand. Her worsening epilepsy shattered her dreams. She had to take medication twice a day, which severely impacted her studies and forced her to abandon her passion for music. At the time, the hippie movement was sweeping through America, and white powder drugs began infiltrating the youth culture. Laura and her friends weren't immune to this wave. Yet, with her family's love and support, Laura managed to lead a relatively stable life. She even had a boyfriend, but everything changed when she turned 16. On September 10, 1984, Laura excitedly told her father she wanted to invite her boyfriend over for dinner. Tim happily agreed. The Miller family had just moved to League City, Texas, an area near Interstate 45. At the time, they hadn't yet installed a landline, and mobile phones were far from common, so Laura had to use a nearby public payphone to make the call. Concerned for her daughter, Laura's mother took her lunch break to accompany her. She planned to wait until Laura finished her call, then drive her back home before returning to work. But Laura's conversation dragged on longer than expected. The 16-year-old assured her mother she'd head home right after the call. Since the payphone was only about 800 meters from their house, and it was still daylight, her mother believed Laura could make it back safely on her own. So, she left her daughter at the payphone and went back to work. That night, a knock at the door echoed through the house. Tim Miller thought it was Laura returning, but when he opened the door, he saw only her boyfriend. Soon after, Laura's mother returned home as well. But with Laura still missing, they couldn't sit down for dinner together. A wave of fear washed over them as a chilling thought crossed their minds. Could Laura have had an epileptic seizure on the way home? They rushed to their car, driving to every hospital in the area, but there was no trace of Laura. With no other options, the Millers turned to the police for help. But the officers' response left them stunned. "It's not a big deal. She probably just went out with friends or ran away after a fight. She'll be back soon," the officer said dismissively. Tim Miller, gripped by overwhelming worry, tried to explain. "My daughter has epilepsy and needs her medication regularly. She's in danger." In response, the officer let out a cold smirk, sneering. "She's always wandering the streets. Plenty of ways to find medicine out there." Despite the small size of the police station, their refusal to take any investigative action or issue a missing person alert was utterly unacceptable. The Miller family searched tirelessly on their own while desperately waiting for any news. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. They never stopped looking, but Laura had vanished without a trace. Hope slowly faded, replaced by a suffocating despair. Deep down, they knew Laura was likely gone forever. During his search for his daughter, Tim Miller made a horrifying discovery. Laura wasn't the only victim. In League City, particularly along Interstate 45, numerous young women had disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. One case in particular stood out. Heidi, a girl whose disappearance bore striking parallels to Laura's. On October 7, 1983, 11 months before Laura vanished, Heidi Marie Viral Fi, a 25-year-old bartender at the Texas Moon Bar, also disappeared without a trace. That day, she had gone to a public payphone, the very same one Laura would later use to call her boyfriend in Houston. The payphone was located next to a convenience store. Store employees reported that after making the call, Heidi walked away and was never seen again. Her family searched desperately and reported her missing to the police, but they were met with indifference. The police brushed it off, suggesting Heidi was just out with friends and would return soon. As time passed, hope dwindled. Heidi's mother passed away from overwhelming grief, while her father persisted, meticulously documenting every lead. But after months of searching, he received devastating news about his daughter. On April 4, 1984, a family living on the 3000 block of Calder Road witnessed a gruesome scene. Their dog returned from the bushes carrying a round object. At first, they thought it was a ball, but as they approached, they recoiled in horror. It was a human skull. Through dental records, the police confirmed it belonged to Heidi. Forensic analysis revealed that Heidi had been attacked with a blunt object before her death. Her ribs were fractured and the cause of death was a severe blow to the head. At the time, DNA testing technology was not yet advanced, and Heidi's body was too decomposed for the police to gather any leads. Still, Heidi's father refused to give up. He compiled a list of potential suspects and urged the police to investigate, but his pleas were met with silence. Tim Miller noticed the suspicious similarities between the two disappearances. He became convinced that the same perpetrator might be responsible for both cases. Tim urged the police to excavate the area where Heidi's body was found, hoping to uncover more crucial evidence, but the police dismissed his suggestion, insisting the two cases were unrelated and would be investigated separately. Determined to seek answers, Tim took matters into his own hands. When he asked the police for the exact location where Heidi's remains were discovered, they refused to provide the information, claiming the area had been sealed off. Even more suspiciously, they warned him not to contact Heidi's family, citing a desire to let them grieve in peace. They issued a similar warning to Heidi's family. Not long after, Heidi's father passed away. On February 2, 1986, 17 months after Laura's disappearance, a group of children riding bikes stumbled upon a horrifying discovery in the same area where Heidi had been found. A strange foul odor led them to a set of remains. Forensic examination revealed the victim had been shot in the back, with severe damage to the ribs and a .2 caliber bullet still lodged in the body. Due to technological limitations at the time, the victim's identity couldn't be determined. But 33 years later, in 2019, with advancements in technology, the remains were identified as those of Audrey Cook, a 30-year-old woman who had gone missing in December 1985. During the investigation, the police also discovered Laura's remains. Next to her skeleton was a blue plaid shirt. Laura was found along Interstate 45, just 3 kilometers from Tim's home. The bodies of Laura, Heidi, and Audrey were all discovered within a 100-meter radius. All three were lying on their backs, discarded carelessly in the grass or a dump site. The killer hadn't even bothered to bury them. They were simply tossed aside like garbage. It was only at this point that the police began to take the situation seriously. Fear gripped the community. Residents started to suspect that a serial killer was on the loose. The area Where these bodies were found would later become known as the Killing Fields, a name that struck terror into the hearts of locals. But the truth is the string of crimes had begun long before. On January 10, 1901, Texas witnessed a historic event. The discovery of the state's first major oil well south of Beaumont. Following this, oil fields were uncovered across the region from East Texas to West Texas and even beneath the Gulf of Mexico. The oil boom transformed Texas entirely, drawing waves of workers from across the country. During World War II, the federal government heavily invested in military bases, weapons factories, prisoner of war camps, and military hospitals. Around 750,000 Texans enlisted, many of them farmers who left their fields behind and never returned. These factors propelled Texas from an agricultural economy toward urbanization and industrialization. The influx of immigrants surged, fueling rapid economic growth. However, the first oil crisis dealt a severe blow to the Western economy, causing a sharp decline in the U.S. GDP. Recognizing the dangers of over-reliance on oil, Texas pushed to diversify its economy. But the sudden population boom brought significant challenges to law and order. Coupled with the rise of white powder drug trafficking and the influence of hippie culture, crime rates soared. Local police were understaffed and investigative techniques were limited, leaving many cases unsolved. Against this backdrop, a series of horrific murders unfolded. On June 17, 1971, Colette Wilson, a 13-year-old member of her school band, vanished under mysterious circumstances. That day, she was riding the bus home with her band director. When they reached the Irwin stop, the director dropped Colette off, and she began walking home. But from that moment, no one saw Colette again. 5 months later, her decomposed body was found near the Attucks Reservoir with the cause of death determined to be a gunshot to the head. Just a month and a half later, on August 4, 1971, 2 other girls, Rhonda Johnson, 14, and Sharon Johnson, 13, also disappeared without a trace. The 2 were best friends, often hanging out at Clear Lake Beach and frequenting a local swimsuit shop. That day, they vanished while heading to the store. Unlike Colette's case, the police quickly launched an investigation into Rhonda and Sharon's disappearance, largely because Rhonda's grandfather was a prominent senator. In January of the following year, 2 boys fishing at Clear Lake discovered a skull, later identified as Sharon's. Her mother recognized a cross pendant on the jawbone. It was her daughter's jewelry. 6 weeks later, the rest of Sharon's remains were found in a marsh near the lake. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, the cause of death couldn't be determined. The case drew significant attention from authorities. By late May 1972, Sheriff Don Morris and Deputy Sheriff Tommy Deal took over the investigation. The 2, with their hard-boiled detective personas, swiftly arrested a suspect just weeks later. The suspect, Michael Self, a man with a prior criminal record, confessed to the murders of Rhonda and Sharon under interrogation by the 2 officers. On May 15, 1973, Michael was sentenced to life in prison. At first glance, the case seemed resolved. However, this was one of the rare cases in the U.S. where a Suspect was convicted solely based on a confession with no direct evidence to support it. Years later, strange truths began to surface. 3 years after Michael's imprisonment, the hard-boiled detectives Don Morris and Tommy Deal were arrested for bank robbery. A shocking revelation came to light. The sheriff and his deputy had been part of a robbery gang since 1972. Don Morris was sentenced to 55 years in prison, while Tommy received 30 years. Both were later released early, but Tommy reoffended and was arrested again. This sparked public suspicion. Was Michael Self truly the killer, or had he been wrongfully convicted? Several police officers revealed that Don and Tommy frequently used violence to extract confessions. In fact, after the girls' murders, Michael had voluntarily gone to the police station to prove his innocence. But the moment he stepped inside, Morris brutally beat him. Don threatened, "I need a confession. If you don't write it, I'll shoot you." He placed bullets on the table, intimidating Michael. In the end, Michael signed a confession, but every word was dictated by the two detectives. When his statement didn't match the case details, they forced him to rewrite it multiple times. Beyond that, while in custody, the two officers staged a fake crime scene, taking Michael to the site to photograph him. These details came from Michael's account, making them difficult to verify. Many believed he was innocent. Michael himself consistently refused parole, demanding only a retrial. However, in 2000, Michael passed away in prison at the age of 52, carrying his unresolved grievances to the grave. The case of Michael Self remains controversial, but it at least had some form of closure. Meanwhile, along Interstate 45, countless other cases remained shrouded in darkness. On July 12, 1971, Brenda K. Jones, a 14-year-old girl, vanished while on her way to visit her aunt in the hospital. Her body was later found floating in Galveston Bay near Seawolf Parkway with a piece of paper or a sock stuffed in her mouth. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. 4 months later, in November 1971, two 15-year-old girls, Debbie Catherine Arian and Maria Talbot Johnson, also disappeared. Witnesses reported seeing them being taken by a man in a white pickup truck. On November 17, Maria's body was found bound with her upper body unclothed floating in the Turner Bayou. The next day, Debbie's body was discovered in the same area. Autopsies revealed both girls had been murdered before their bodies were dumped in the water. On January 7, 1973, the body of Kimberly Ray Pitchford, a 16-year-old girl, was found in a ditch along County Road 65. Kimberly was a quiet girl. That day marked her first driving lesson, but after the class ended, she vanished without a trace. In July 1984, Ellen Ray Simpson Bone, a 29-year-old woman, was introduced to Clyde Hedrick by her friend Katie at the Texas Moon Bar. Clyde, a smooth-talking man who could sing and dance, quickly captured Ellen's attention. That night, they left the bar together, and Ellen vanished from that moment on. Katie, her best friend, was consumed with worry and repeatedly pressed Clyde for answers as he was the last person to see Ellen alive, but he consistently denied any responsibility. During a heated argument, Clyde lost his temper and snapped, "You want to see Ellen? "I'll take you to her." He led Katie to a dense wooded area on Old Causeway Road, where he overturned old tires and a tattered sofa. A set of skeletal remains emerged. It was Ellen, still wearing the necklace from that fateful night. Clyde threatened Katie. "If you speak a word, this will be your fate." The horrifying scene haunted Katie, and it took her nearly 6 months to muster the courage to report it to the police. Due to the humid climate, frequent storms, and tornadoes in the region, most victims' bodies were found in a heavily decomposed state, often reduced to mere skeletons. Ellen was no exception. The coroner couldn't determine her cause of death. Although Clyde was arrested, the lack of evidence meant he was only convicted of tampering with a corpse. He was fined $2,000 and sentenced to 1 year in prison. Clyde claimed that he and Ellen had gone night swimming, and when he returned to shore, he found her dead in the water. He said he intended to take her to a hospital, but fearing he'd be suspected of murder, decided to dispose of her body instead. How much truth was there in Clyde's story? In July 1991, Donna Perdome, a 34-year-old woman, went missing. 2 months later, her body was discovered in a field off Calder Road in an advanced state of decomposition. The FBI immediately launched an investigation. Using criminal profiling, they identified the suspect's likely traits. Someone who owned property near the crime scene harbored a deep resentment toward women and kept records related to the cases. Initially, all suspicion fell on Clyde, but soon other suspects emerged. Abel, a former NASA scientist who had transitioned to running a horse ranch after a successful career, became a person of interest. Notably, Abel's ranch was located near the sites where Laura and other victims were found. Abel had been through 3 failed marriages, and his ex-wives accused him of domestic violence and animal cruelty. One of them revealed that Abel had threatened her life if she didn't comply with his bizarre desires. Additionally, Abel showed an unusual interest in the cases, collecting documents, and even expressing a desire to assist in the investigations. Most crucially, Abel owned a .22 caliber gun, the same type of weapon that had killed Audrey. The bullet found in Audrey's body could have been a pivotal piece of evidence, but in a tragic twist, that key evidence was inadvertently destroyed. During the processing of Audrey's remains, the forensic team boiled the bones to clean them, accidentally damaging the bullet inside her body. This made it impossible for the police to match it to Abel's gun. Without concrete evidence, Abel remained free. He even began leading tourists to the crime scenes, sparking outrage among the public, especially Tim, Laura's father. After his daughter's death, Tim founded a non-profit organization to support the families of missing victims. Initially, he suspected Clyde, but upon learning about Abel, he became convinced that Abel was the true culprit. Tim rallied others to investigate Abel's horse ranch. They scoured the property, uncovering women's clothing and handbags. Under mounting public pressure, Abel sought a protective order and left the Interstate 45 area. In 2005, he took his own life by driving a golf cart onto a train track. Abel's death left many questions unanswered, and the case hit a dead end with the killer still at large. On March 5, 1996, Crystal Jean Baker, after an argument with her family, ran away from home. She called a friend from a convenience store. near Interstate 45. 2 hours later, her body was found under a bridge. She had been assaulted and strangled to death. Crystal was the niece of actress Marilyn Monroe. On April 3, 1997, Laura Smither, a 12-year-old girl, vanished while jogging in the morning in a safe residential neighborhood. Over 6,000 people, including the FBI and U.S. Marines, joined the search effort. On April 20, Laura's body was discovered in a retention pond. In the aftermath, schools began distributing biosample kits to families, collecting hair and nail samples from students to aid in DNA identification of victims. On July 15, 1997, Kelly, a 20-year-old woman, disappeared at a payphone near a convenience store. On August 17, Jessica Lee Kane, a 17-year-old, went missing after her car was found abandoned on Interstate 45. These are just a fraction of the long list of victims. The nightmare on Interstate 45 stretched into 2006, with many cases still unsolved. Over 3 decades, at least 30 people became victims along Interstate 45, possibly more. The main cause was local police negligence. They dismissed missing persons cases, neglecting proper investigations. Victims were dumped near the highway, yet police labeled them missing and abandoned the cases. Bodies were found months, even years later. The hot, humid climate caused rapid decomposition, erasing evidence and making investigations nearly impossible. Even when the killer was known, convictions were rare. This likely emboldened criminals who grew brazen, defying the law. On May 17, 1997, a turning point arrived. The first known survivor emerged. Sandra, a 19-year-old, was making a call at a convenience store in Webster when she noticed a man staring at her intently. As she left the store, she discovered her tire had been slashed. The same man coincidentally passed by and offered to help. In the darkness, Sandra didn't notice the knife he was clutching. He forced her into his car, speeding down Interstate 45 with the intent to assault her. Sandra fought back fiercely and jumped from the moving vehicle. Though severely injured, she survived. The predator, panicked, fled the scene. Sandra was rushed to a hospital and after a few days, she provided the police with a detailed account of the attack and a description of her assailant. The predator, William Lewis Rhee, a 38-year-old man, was swiftly apprehended. The investigation revealed him to be a dangerous criminal. In April 1986, he had kidnapped and assaulted the 19-year-old daughter of a deputy sheriff. She managed to escape when he let his guard down at a motel. William was arrested but released on bail. Soon after, he assaulted another woman. This time, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison. However, his lawyer argued there were procedural errors in the trial, and in October 1996, William was granted a suspended sentence and released. By 2016, he began cooperating with the police, providing a map marking the burial sites of his victims and offering to confess to all his crimes in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. The authorities, however, rejected this deal. Using William's map, the police located the remains of 2 victims, Jessica Lee Kane and Kelly Ann Cox. William later confessed to killing 4 people. On August 19, 2021, a court in Oklahoma sentenced William to death for the murder of Tiffany. In March 2021, he was extradited to Texas for further trials where he received a life sentence for the murders of Laura Smither, Jessica, and Kelly. But William wasn't the only killer. Now, let's turn to the second perpetrator, Edward Harold Bell, a depraved fugitive who evaded justice for decades. Do you remember Rhonda and Sharon, the regulars at the swimsuit shop? Edward, a co-owner of the store, had a sick habit of exposing himself to women. He had been arrested 12 times for this behavior, but always managed to escape conviction. In 1978, Edward exposed himself to a group of girls. Larry, a 26-year-old former U.S. Marine, stepped in to intervene, but Edward pulled out a .22 caliber gun, firing multiple shots at Larry before using a rifle to shoot him in the head. Larry's mother and sister witnessed the entire ordeal. Edward was arrested but fled the U.S. for decades after posting bail. On December 2, 1992, a widely broadcast television program about Larry's murder led to Edward's capture in Panama. He was finally sentenced to 70 years in prison. While incarcerated, Edward confessed to a reporter that he had killed 11 people, including Rhonda and Sharon. Many experts also believe he was a serial killer, but when he died on April 20, 2019, Edward had only been prosecuted for Larry's murder. The third killer, Mark Stallings, remains a mysterious figure. In 2013, he was sentenced to life in prison for an unrelated crime. Then unexpectedly, he confessed to the murders of Donna and Audrey. His confession matched the case details perfectly. Yet inexplicably, he was never charged for these two murders. The fourth culprit brought to justice was Kevin Edison Smith. In 2009, during an arrest related to drug charges, the police collected his DNA. The sample matched semen found on Crystal Jean Baker, the victim of the 1996 murder. The jury reached a verdict after just 30 minutes of deliberation and Kevin was sentenced to life in prison. In 2019, they signed the Crystal Jean Baker Act into law, allowing the collection of DNA from felony suspects before a conviction. This legislation has since played a crucial role in numerous investigations. The last perpetrator in this grim saga is Clyde Edwin Hedrick, a charismatic yet deeply sinister man. Clyde was a charmer who could sing and dance, captivating those around him. He had countless girlfriends and a string of failed marriages. He also had a daughter named Mara who later exposed his depraved behavior. Clyde was a serial philanderer, constantly arguing with her mother. He even exposed himself to Mara in a disturbing act of indecency. By the time she reached high school, Mara ran away from home. Years later, after her mother divorced Clyde, the two returned to their old house. It was then that Mara discovered a hole in her bedroom wall. Clyde had been secretly watching her for years. He also forced her to drink concoctions she didn't like, after which she would pass out while watching TV. In a hazy state, she felt someone groping her, but couldn't wake up. When the police reopened Ellen's case involving Clyde, they uncovered a hidden truth. Initially, the autopsy couldn't determine Ellen's cause of death, so Clyde was only convicted of tampering with a corpse. However, Upon exhumation, a large fracture was found on Ellen's skull, indicating she had suffered severe trauma before her death. No one could explain why the original coroner's report had overlooked this critical detail. In 2014, Clyde was retried and sentenced to 20 years in prison for manslaughter. While serving his sentence, he confessed to the murders of Laura and Heidi. Yet, he still faced no legal consequences for these crimes. This raises a haunting question. Why do so many killers confess to their crimes, but escape conviction? The primary reason lies in the negligence of the police, which led to the loss of crucial evidence. For instance, the blue plaid shirt found near Laura's body mysteriously disappeared. Laura's remains were exhumed 3 times due to the police mishandling evidence collection procedures. Tim, Laura's father, had to bury his daughter 3 times, compounding his grief with each burial. While investigative technology was limited at the time, proper evidence preservation could have, with today's advanced forensic methods, brought the perpetrators to justice. In 2021, Clyde was released early for good behavior and now resides in a halfway house. In 2022, Tim Miller filed a civil lawsuit against Clyde, and the court ordered Clyde to pay $24 million in damages. Whether Clyde will actually pay the sum remains an open question. The cases we've explored paint a dark and complex picture of crime, injustice, and systemic failures in the legal system. Many investigations stalled due to local police negligence, poor evidence preservation, lackluster investigations, and indifference toward missing persons. Cases created an environment where criminals thrived. Unprofessional handling of evidence, especially in the early years of this crime spree, led to the loss of vital clues, making prosecutions nearly impossible. These cases serve as a stark warning about the urgent need to reform the legal system, enhance police capabilities, and protect the rights of victims' families. Story 5. He was a talented, successful, and wealthy software engineer. Not only brilliant and hard-working, he was also a kind-hearted man who always put his family first. His life seemed perfect, unmarred by any flaws. She was a girl born in a poor rural village where the dream of going to school never became a reality. With no education or prospects, her entire world was confined to a handful of words she could read and the grueling days of scraping by to survive. They belonged to 2 entirely different worlds, separated not just by thousands of miles, but by the chasm of fate itself. They should have had no connection whatsoever. Yet, destiny brought them together in a way no one could have predicted, cruelly thrusting them into a merciless spiral from which there was no escape once they stepped in. Now, let's travel back to 2002 and step into a story woven with money, conspiracy, love, and betrayal. A tale where dark secrets lurk beneath a glamorous facade, and every choice comes with a steep price. Angela City, a small city in the northern Philippines with a population of over 400,000, has a history marked by dramatic turning points. Once occupied by Japan, Angela City later became the site of the US-built Clark Air Base, transforming it into a key strategic hub. The presence of the American military brought a wave of immigrants and attracted countless Filipino workers seeking a livelihood. At its peak, the city thrived, especially after nightfall, when dazzling lights mingled with pulsating music. Foreign soldiers indulged in endless nights of drinking and revelry, alongside women draped in alluring, captivating beauty. Even after the U.S. military withdrew, Angeles City retained its vibrant energy. Bars, casinos, and karaoke lounges sprang up like mushrooms, turning the city into a hot spot in Southeast Asia, renowned for its electrifying nightlife. It also earned a more sinister nickname, the City of Sin. And it was in this very place that the story we're about to tell unfolded. Stephen Davis, a brilliant young software engineer who had risen to a leadership position at a company in the Philippines. Earning over $60,000 a year, he was the epitome of a winner in the game of life. Born on March 27, 1970 in Nottingham, England, Stephen grew up in an ordinary family. His parents had 3 children, and as the eldest, he had 2 younger sisters. As a child, Stephen was a bit mischievous, but still a good kid, always getting along well with his family. Their lives flowed peacefully, seemingly destined to remain that way until a devastating tragedy struck when he was 14. Stephen's father died in a car accident, leaving an unfillable void. The shock transformed Stephen overnight from a naive child to a mature young man in the blink of an eye. As the only man in the household, Stephen took on the responsibility of caring for his mother and 2 sisters. From that moment, he became incredibly diligent, tending to his family's every need, ensuring they never lacked for anything. A few years later, his mother remarried a man named Alan. Alan's arrival brought joy back to the family. He bonded well with the 3 children and quickly became the new pillar of the household. This gave Stephen more time to pursue his passion for computers. Whenever he had a free moment, Stephen would sit in front of a screen, tirelessly studying every detail. He didn't hang out with friends or care for social gatherings, but that focus led to remarkable achievements. After years of self-study, Stephen not only mastered computer hardware, but also became proficient in programming, a highly promising skill in the 1980s. As expected, his exceptional self-taught talent landed him his first job, making his family immensely proud. From then on, Stephen poured his heart into his career. At 21, his outstanding abilities caught the eye of a company in Hong Kong, which offered him a salary 3 times higher just to bring the young man on board. The lucrative offer was too tempting for Stephen to resist. He also saw it as a chance to travel the world and broaden his horizons. His mother, Margaret, though reluctant to part with her son, didn't want to hold him back. In the end, she let Stephen go, supporting him and chasing his dreams. Keep the name Margaret in mind. She's a key figure in today's story. With his new job, Stephen threw himself into work relentlessly. Before long, he had carved out a solid position for himself in Hong Kong. A high salary and a smooth career made his life increasingly comfortable and prosperous. Yet, no matter how busy he was, weekends were still a time to unwind. At the time, the wealthy elite often chose Angeles City as their playground. As mentioned earlier, the city was notorious for having Southeast Asia's largest red light district, brimming with casinos, bars, karaoke lounges, and countless entertainment services, all at very affordable prices. Stephen and his colleagues were no exception. They often visited on weekends to distress. But unlike most who flocked to bars in search of women, Stephen had a different passion, soaring through the skies. He was particularly enamored with powered paragliding to the point of joining a flying club in Angela City. Whenever he had time, he'd head there, strap into his paraglider, and take off into the sky, reveling in the absolute freedom of flight. One night, Stephen stepped into a bar where dim lights illuminated radiant faces, and the music blended with the scent of alcohol in the air. Amid the lively crowd, his gaze suddenly locked onto a youthful, innocent face, the kind he was drawn to. Without hesitation, Stephen approached her, chose her, and took her out for the night. At the time, girls like her were far from rare in Angela City bars. Most came from impoverished families with no access to education. To survive, they entered this glittering world, dancing for entertainment or selling their bodies for a few coins. Back then, a night of dancing in a bar earned them about £1, while selling their bodies could bring in £5. After a few days together, Stephen became convinced that this girl was the one fate had destined for him. Without a second thought, he paid £500 to buy her freedom from the bar owner. Her name was Evelyn Talagolan, and she hailed from Dalma Island, a destitute island in the Philippines. There, clean water and electricity were non-existent. Homes were mere thatched huts, and having food was a luxury, let alone education. Driven by poverty, girls in the village grew up dreaming of working in bars, hoping one day a wealthy man would notice them, turning them from sparrows into phoenixes, changing their fate and that of their families. Evelyn left home at 13, heading alone to the bustling city. She worked as a dancer in a bar, earning a meager £1 a day, but it was still better than life back home. At least she had food and nice clothes to wear. Like many other girls, she longed for the day a wealthy, blue-eyed, blonde-haired foreigner would appear to rescue her from this life. Evelyn believed she was incredibly lucky to have met Stephen. To her, he was the ideal partner, young, handsome, kind, and deeply devoted to her. Most importantly, he was rich, exactly the kind of man she had always dreamed of. Throughout their time together, Evelyn was obedient, gentle, and knew how to charm and show affection, which delighted Stephen. The more time they spent together, the deeper he fell for her, to the point of entertaining a wild idea, marrying her. Though fully aware of this woman's past, Stephen didn't dare tell his parents the whole truth. He only mentioned that Evelyn came from a poor fishing village, had little education, and had worked in a bar. His mother, Margaret, assumed it was just a regular bar like those in England, and didn't think much of it. In 1997, Margaret and her husband flew to Hong Kong to visit their son. This was also their first time meeting their daughter-in-law, Evelyn. Though Evelyn behaved politely and respectfully, after a few days, Margaret found herself unable to warm to the girl. The gap between her son and Evelyn was too vast. One was a high computer expert, the other barely educated, hardly able to read or write. They had nothing in common to talk about, as if they came from two entirely different worlds. But there was little she could do. Her son treated Evelyn like a treasure, and Margaret didn't feel it was her place to interfere. She could only let things be, hoping the two would find happiness together. In March 1997, Stephen and Evelyn officially registered their marriage in Hong Kong. At the time, Evelyn was only 17, too young to legally marry, so she borrowed her older sister's identification documents, falsifying her age to claim she was 21. Shortly after their marriage, Evelyn became pregnant and gave birth to their daughter Jessica. 2 years later, their son Joshua was born. The family of 4 lived in blissful harmony, their home filled with laughter. Not long after Joshua's birth, Stephen began considering a move to the Philippines, returning to Angela City, the place where he and Evelyn first met. Beyond sentimental reasons, there was a practical motive. The parent company in Hong Kong had just opened a branch in Makati and Stephen was appointed as its director. His monthly salary reached £5,000, a top-tier income in the Philippines at the time. Stephen rented a villa in an affluent neighborhood in Angel City, about a 3-hour drive from the company, for his wife and children to live in. He also provided Evelyn with a monthly allowance of $1,000, an amount equivalent to the annual income of an average Filipino at the time. Additionally, he hired a housemaid to handle chores and childcare, none other than Evelyn's older sister. With this arrangement, the household ran smoothly, and Evelyn didn't have to lift a finger. In just a few years, Evelyn had gone from a bar dancer earning $1 to $5 a night to a wealthy wife with a $1,000 monthly allowance. Her family back in the village also reaped the benefits of this marriage. Stephen sent a substantial sum to his father-in-law, enabling them to buy a fishing boat and build the first brick house in their village. Since latching onto Stephen, Evelyn and her family had completely transformed their lives, becoming the envy of their entire village. As for Stephen, his life was equally fulfilling. A happy family, a thriving career, a beautiful wife, and obedient children. But human greed knows no bounds. A meticulously planned murder plot was slowly tightening its grip around him. On July 17, 2002, a seemingly ordinary Wednesday, Stephen and his colleague Michael had to work late due to a heavy workload, staying at the office until 10 p.m. By the time they finished packing up and returned to their rented apartment near the company, it was 10:45 p.m. Exhausted, Stephen collapsed onto his bed and fell into a deep sleep almost instantly. Michael, however, couldn't rest. His girlfriend was on a flight from Hong Kong to the Philippines to reunite with him, leaving him eagerly awaiting her arrival. It wasn't until 1 a.m. that he picked her up from the airport and brought her back to the apartment. After washing up and resting briefly, the two finally drifted off to sleep, but their rest was short-lived. Michael's girlfriend suddenly sensed something unusual. Footsteps outside the door, flickering light seeping through the crack. Michael briefly thought it might be Stephen waking up, but before he could call out, the door was violently kicked open. 3 unfamiliar men burst in, guns in hand. One of them pointed a pistol at Michael's head and shouted something in Filipino. When Michael responded with a denial, the 3 men quickly retreated, immediately storming into the next room, Stephen's room. Just seconds later, 4 deafening gunshots rang out, followed by the sound of frantic footsteps racing down the stairs. The roar of a car engine tore through the stillness of the night. It all happened so fast that by the time Michael came to his senses, it was too late. Stephen lay slumped in a pool of blood, his breathing already gone. Michael immediately called the police. An ambulance arrived swiftly and rushed Stephen to the hospital, but it was Futile. He was gone. At the same time, Michael tried to contact Evelyn. It took 4 hours for her to finally answer the phone. Michael assumed that upon hearing the tragic news, Evelyn would immediately inform Stephen's parents in England, but she did nothing of the sort. With no other choice, Michael called Margaret himself. When she heard her son had been murdered, Margaret was stunned, her body going limp as she collapsed into a chair. It took her a full hour to regain her composure, just enough to arrange a flight to the Philippines with her husband. 2 days later at the funeral home, Margaret and her husband saw their son again, but only as a cold, lifeless body. Overwhelmed with grief, they immediately sought out the police to demand answers. Perhaps fearing that a murder involving a British citizen might spark diplomatic issues or for reasons unknown. The Philippine police conducted their investigation with suspicious haste. They suggested the mastermind could be a business partner or rival of Stephen's. And within just 1 day, they concluded it was a killing driven by a business dispute. But Margaret was quick to question this. If this truly was a targeted hit over a commercial conflict, why was Michael unharmed, especially since he recalled a crucial detail from that night? The 3 intruders had asked, "Is this him? Are you sure it's the right guy?" Clearly, they were after a specific target. Just days later, the Philippine police abruptly changed their story, claiming it was a case of mistaken robbery. Yet, Margaret remained unconvinced. She grew increasingly suspicious of her daughter-in-law, Evelyn. Sensing something deeply sinister, she stated with unwavering certainty, this wasn't just a woman's intuition. It was backed by a series of disturbing details Margaret had uncovered. First, when Stephen was killed, Evelyn didn't bother to notify his family. It was Michael who broke the news. For a wife who had just lost her husband to be so indifferent, wasn't that beyond strange? Second, when Margaret and her husband arrived at the funeral home, Evelyn didn't greet them or offer any comfort. Her demeanor was that of a stranger, completely detached, showing not even a hint of grief. The first thing she asked was, "Did he say anything?" Then she brought up money. Her coldness was profoundly suspicious. Third, Evelyn let slip a detail that raised Margaret's suspicions. She mentioned they had been in the apartment for 20 minutes. This information had never been publicly disclosed by the police. How could Evelyn know the exact time frame unless she was involved? Fourth, a few months earlier, when Margaret visited Stephen in the Philippines, she had inadvertently recorded Evelyn making a secretive phone call behind everyone's back. Evelyn sounded cheerful, even laughing heartily. At the time, Margaret found it odd, but now, in hindsight, it only deepened her doubts. Fifth, Stephen had once confided in his mother that his marriage was falling apart. Evelyn did nothing but spend money, even secretly stealing from him. She neglected their children, constantly making demands. Sixth, while sorting through Stephen's belongings, Margaret found a pawn shop receipt dated 2 weeks before his death. The item pawned was Stephen's wedding ring, and the person who pawned it was Evelyn. Seventh, when Margaret had previously tried to help Evelyn pay rent, the landlord revealed a shocking truth. When Stephen was at work, Evelyn frequently brought various men to the house, making the apartment a noisy hub. The landlord was so fed up that they no longer wanted to rent to them. Piece by piece, the clues came together, forming a chilling picture. Evelyn was clearly hiding dark secrets, and all these signs pointed to her involvement in Stephen's death. But when Margaret brought her suspicions to the Philippine police, they were utterly dismissive. The only response she received was, "There's not enough evidence." In reality, crime in the area was rampant. Robberies, thefts, and assaults were commonplace. The police lacked the manpower to investigate every case thoroughly, especially those without pressure from the media or authorities. Frustrated by the police's indifference, Margaret turned to the British Embassy in the Philippines for help. To her surprise, the embassy showed little interest. Perhaps they were too accustomed to the chaos of the region, knowing investigations here rarely led anywhere. In the end, they gently advised her, "You should leave and go back home." Those words plunged Margaret into a pit of despair. In a foreign land, with no one to help, and the authorities indifferent, what could she, a lone woman, do? This very indifference likely emboldened the true culprit to act so brazenly without fear of consequences. But Margaret wasn't just a grieving woman. She was a mother. A mother who couldn't accept her son's unjust death being ignored with no one seeking justice. Even if the whole world turned its back, even if she stood alone, Margaret vowed to uncover the truth so her son could rest in peace. Investigating on her own was a dangerous and daunting path. A local bluntly warned her, "Anyone who benefits from Stephen's death sees you as a threat, and obstacles get removed." In other words, she could be the next target. Yet, this woman didn't waver. From that moment, she was no longer just a grieving mother. She had transformed into a goddess of vengeance, determined to find the killer. Margaret bought notebooks, a recorder, and various investigative tools, meticulously analyzing every detail of the case. In her notes, she wrote, "Why was Evelyn so desperate for money? What was she spending it on? Who was she secretly contacting? A lover, perhaps? Who were the men frequently visiting the house when Stephen was away? Could one of them be the killer?" It all seemed plausible, but investigating alone was impossible. So Margaret decided to spend a significant sum to hire a local private investigator, tasking them with following Evelyn 24/7. At the same time, she actively reached out to Evelyn's relatives, friends, and neighbors. Her method was simple: money for information. Surprisingly, this approach, which seemed unlikely to work, proved incredibly effective. Some of Stephen's colleagues revealed that his marriage to Evelyn had long been crumbling. At first, there was still some affection between them, but in recent months, things had become extremely tense. The reason: Evelyn had taken a lover. Not only that, she did nothing but spend money, even to the point of stealing from her husband. Evelyn's irresponsibility reached its peak when Stephen discovered that their daughter Jessica, despite being of school age, had never been enrolled. The tuition money had been taken by Evelyn long ago, unbeknownst to him. Furious, but still holding on to a shred of hope, Stephen sat down to talk with his wife. He proposed that if she ended things with her lover, they could salvage their marriage. He gave her two options. Either you go to school to get an education, or you find a job. But for someone like Evelyn, accustomed to a life of dependency and laziness, how could she accept either option? In the end, Stephen had no choice but to cut off her allowance entirely. This decision was far from simple. It could push her to act recklessly. Some colleagues warned Stephen to be cautious, to avoid letting this woman bite back when cornered. Yet, Stephen remained calm. Tensions between the two escalated beyond reconciliation. Finally, Stephen decided to move out, renting an apartment near his company to limit his time at home. His life began to revolve around late-night drinks and bar visits, a way to escape the turmoil caused by Evelyn. Another crucial clue soon emerged. Evelyn was intimately involved with a man named Arnold. The two were often seen embracing, displaying overly affectionate behavior. This man was very likely her lover. Meanwhile, after days of surveillance, the private investigator discovered two men frequently sneaking in and out of Evelyn's house. One of them was Arnold. Not only that, the investigator captured clear photos of them. With this evidence, the police finally took decisive action. They swiftly arrested the two suspicious men, Arnold and his accomplice, Alexander, who worked in the same trade. Ironically, due to the police's limited budget, all travel expenses from Makati to Angela City for the investigation and arrests were covered by Margaret. She even had to pay for the police's fuel costs. After the suspects were apprehended, a key witness emerged: Michael. On the night of the murder, Michael had seen the killers firsthand. So, upon arriving at the police station, he immediately recognized the two men in custody as the gunman who attacked them that night. With the direct testimony of a witness on August 16, 2002, Arnold and Alexander were officially charged with murder. Normally, apprehending the culprits would be cause for relief, but things were far from straightforward. A sympathetic officer secretly warned Margaret that this case was anything but simple. At the same time, the British Embassy issued an ultimatum, demanding she leave the Philippines immediately or face grave danger. The reason? The two men just arrested were former anti-drug police officers. They not only had ties to the police force, but were also connected to local criminal gangs. Now, charged with murder, their associates might attempt to rescue or worse, silence Margaret to erase all evidence. If anything happened to her, with no plaintiff left, the case would be buried forever. After careful consideration, Margaret decided to temporarily withdraw, seeking safety elsewhere. Though she chose to leave, Margaret remained deeply worried about the safety of her two grandchildren. Following the British Embassy's advice, she agreed to return to the UK. But before departing, she wanted to do one last thing. She contacted Evelyn, offering a sum of money in exchange for taking Jessica on a one-week trip. Seeing the immediate benefit, Evelyn quickly agreed and handed over Jessica's passport. In September 2002, after over a month of tension and grief, Margaret and her husband finally left the haunting city, safely returning to the UK. Most importantly, they successfully brought Jessica with them. Though two of the killers had been caught, Margaret had no intention of stopping. A third gunman was still at large, and more crucially, the true mastermind had yet to be exposed. However, returning to the Philippines at this point was impossible. The British Embassy had made It clear if she returned, her life would be in danger. To make matters worse, Evelyn was furious upon discovering her mother-in-law had taken Jessica out of the Philippines. In a rage, she immediately filed a lawsuit against Margaret, accusing her of kidnapping. This meant that if Margaret set foot in a Philippine airport, she could be arrested on the spot. But Margaret refused to give up. She was determined to see the case through, even if she couldn't be physically present. She sent emails to anyone who might pressure the Philippine police, from British MPs and lawyers, both domestic and international, to the British Embassy in the Philippines. At the same time, she continued hiring private investigators, gathering information from Evelyn's friends and acquaintances. Whenever a lead required police action, Margaret had to cover their fuel expenses yet again. These costs were astronomical. But Margaret never hesitated. When her savings ran dry, she didn't think twice about mortgaging her house to fund the investigation. Her efforts didn't stop there. She also wanted to bring her grandson Joshua to the UK. When Evelyn learned of this, her anger intensified through a mediator. She declared in fury, "Taking my daughter wasn't enough. And now you want my son, too." Her words were nothing short of a threat, heightening Margaret's fears for Joshua's safety. Desperate, she sought information from Evelyn's close contacts, hoping someone knew the boy's whereabouts. If you're wondering why these people were so willing to help Margaret, the answer is simple. Beyond the money, many of them genuinely despised Evelyn. Since gaining wealth, Evelyn had treated her less fortunate relatives with contempt. Her cruel words and actions turned former allies into enemies. Through her persistence, Margaret finally received a crucial tip from one of Evelyn's relatives. Joshua was on Durham Island living with his maternal grandparents. Margaret immediately reached out to the grandparents. In truth, the elderly couple no longer had any affection for Evelyn. Since Stephen, their ATM, was gone, everything had changed. This fractured relationship gave Margaret an opportunity. She offered over £3,000 to bring Joshua to the UK. After weighing their options, the grandparents realized they couldn't raise the child properly. By letting him go, they'd not only be relieved of the burden, but also gain a substantial sum. So, they quickly agreed. After over a month of negotiations and navigating complex paperwork, Joshua was finally brought to the UK. But upon seeing him, Margaret was horrified. Joshua was severely malnourished, his eyes sunken, his body frail. Even more alarming, his ankles bore clear marks of being tied, evidence he had been bound to prevent escape. While working to care for and help Joshua recover, Margaret never stopped investigating the case. After months of relentless pursuit, she finally achieved a major breakthrough thanks to a revelation from Evelyn's aunt. The woman identified the third gunman, Robin Buddies. Ironically, Robin was none other than the husband of Gina, Evelyn's sister. However, Robin had fled immediately after the murder, and despite the time that had passed, the Philippine police had yet to apprehend him. On June 14, 2003, 11 months after the murder, the Philippine police finally tracked down and apprehended Robin. Under the pressure of the investigation, Robin quickly offered to cooperate. He agreed to testify against Evelyn, promising to reveal the entire truth without holding anything back in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence. According to Robin's testimony, he admitted to directly participating in Stephen's murder. But the mastermind pulling the strings was none other than Evelyn. It was Evelyn who guided the group, providing the key to the apartment. During the attack, she didn't leave. She sat in the car downstairs. After it was over, Evelyn repeatedly warned Robin and his accomplices to stay silent, forbidding them from breathing a word to anyone. And her motive for orchestrating it all, money. Evelyn had bragged to Robin about her husband's wealth, boasting that he owned property in the UK and had a substantial life insurance policy. If Stephen died, she would inherit a massive fortune. In November 2003, with Robin's testimony, the trial of Arnold and Alexander, who had been detained for 14 months, finally commenced. At the trial, Gina, Evelyn's sister, also testified. She confirmed that her sister had an ambiguous relationship with Arnold, and Evelyn herself had admitted it to her. Not only that, Evelyn had been financially supporting Arnold, buying him a motorcycle and renting a house for him. Evelyn had declared that once Stephen was dealt with and she had the money, she and Arnold could be together freely. These statements perfectly aligned with Robin's earlier confession, further solidifying the evidence against the two defendants. In the end, Arnold and Alexander were convicted of murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison without parole. They were also fined 50,000 pesos, an amount to be paid to Stephen's children as compensation. Robin, however, escaped imprisonment by agreeing to testify and fully confessing the truth. Now, only Evelyn remained at large. The police issued a warrant for her arrest, but finding her was no easy task. The Philippines, with over 7,000 islands and a lack of robust surveillance systems, made it simple for Evelyn to disappear into a remote hideout, rendering her capture incredibly difficult. Time passed quietly, and months later, there were still no leads. The Philippine police weren't particularly eager. Suspects going off the grid were hardly uncommon for them. But Margaret wasn't like that for her. As long as the mastermind behind her son's murder remained free, she could never find peace. Finally, at 6:30 p.m. on February 17, 2004, the police located Evelyn. She was hiding in a remote village in Zam province, surviving with the help of a friend. She was immediately escorted back to Makati. Even then, Evelyn loudly proclaimed her innocence. She insisted she hadn't been on the run, claiming she was simply living a normal life. Notably, by this point, Evelyn had been completely abandoned by her family and relatives. Some even expressed disgust, declaring that having a husband kill her in the family was an unforgivable disgrace. During her time awaiting trial, no one visited her except her father. Those once close to Evelyn no longer cared whether she lived or died. At the trial, Evelyn continued to deny all charges. She insisted on her innocence, even claiming to have an alibi, but all her defenses were futile. The police had gathered ample evidence, summoning 14 witnesses to testify and building a tight, comprehensive chain of proof. Meanwhile, Evelyn couldn't produce a single witness to support her so-called alibi. On November 25, 2004, the day of the final verdict, Margaret and her husband once again traveled thousands of miles to the Philippines. They wanted to witness firsthand the sentencing of the woman who had killed their son. In a cramped courtroom in Manila, as Evelyn was brought in, she maintained a calm demeanor, showing no signs of worry. She didn't even glance at Margaret and her husband sitting nearby. But the moment the judge declared her guilty of murder, sentencing her to 40 years in prison without parole, her face froze, her eyes filled with shock. Margaret had never expected a death penalty. For her, this outcome was more than enough to feel satisfied, enough for Stephen's soul to rest in peace. After leaving the courtroom, Margaret requested to meet Evelyn. She wanted to see if Evelyn had anything to say. But Evelyn sat there coldly, putting on her glasses, not even bothering to stand. When asked about her children, she said she missed them dearly, but her face betrayed no emotion. Even so, Margaret left her a small notebook filled with drawings by the children. She also promised to send regular letters so Evelyn could know how her children were growing up. But that was all she could do. From now on, Margaret hoped Evelyn would truly reflect on her crimes behind bars. Looking back on the entire case, Evelyn once had the chance to transform her life, to hold a future many could only dream of. Yet, she never cherished the happiness she had. Many couldn't understand why Evelyn had gone down this path. But for Margaret, the answer was clear. From the very beginning, Evelyn only cared about money. She never loved Stephen, never saw him as a true partner. To her, money mattered more than anything, and people like that are the most dangerous, willing to do anything, even commit heinous crimes like murder, to achieve their goals. Margaret's story of vengeance quickly captured widespread attention. After the case concluded, numerous newspapers published articles about her, praising her as a courageous, resilient mother who never backed down in her quest for justice for her son. Without Margaret's persistence, this case might have faded into obscurity, with the culprits walking free. In fact, the 14 witnesses who testified, along with those who helped Margaret gather evidence, had all faced threats. Some even had to relocate multiple times to avoid retaliation, showing that the perpetrators weren't just ordinary criminals. They had sophisticated methods. Fortunately, thanks to international attention, the case was finally taken seriously by the police, leading to a fair trial that delivered justice for Stephen. Margaret, this remarkable mother, endured 2.5 years of torment from the day her son was murdered to the day Evelyn was sentenced. Not a single night did she sleep peacefully. Not a single day did she stop seeking justice for her son. She had spent nearly her entire fortune pursuing the truth, even mortgaging her house twice. In the aftermath, Margaret decided to document her arduous journey in a book titled For the Love of My Son, a work that recounts every detail of her unrelenting battle against the perpetrators. As the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper, thank you for joining me here at Mr. Night Cared. True Crime Stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep. And until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.